On the eve of 2076, the population of the planet collided with the New World. Monsters from dangerous dungeons began to ruthlessly destroy people. No one had a chance of survival, but at the same time, gifted appeared. They called themselves hunters and chose the struggle against the ugly. Since that time, power has begun to value in the world. Hunting has become a competition. It was in this era of hunters David faced the horrific reality. He was a common warrior. In the modern world, gifted warriors were the most primitive, widespread craft. Not different. A group of arrogant boys whose leader began to catch him from the reflection of the boy was brought out. The arrogant brazen was Liam. The unsuccessful awakening of David prompted him to start another humiliation. Turning to the opponent, the guy with a smile remarked that he was awakened by an ice magician. He suggested to make sure, and Liam had to lose his face without losing his face, hiding behind the backs of friends. It is unknown what the fight would end if it was not for the raiding team from the Guild of Hunters to Spirit. The leader of the team was a 95th level storm archer, in combination, deputy chairman of Guild Iden. David forgot about everything in the world. Earlier, he saw hunters of such rank only on the advertising shields. Liam, as expected, immediately accepted for his subsistence, asking for their team. Iden asked the boy about his profession. The submergery replied that he was an ice magician. The specialization of control, the provision of the card was approved. David could not believe that Liam had been accepted so quickly. With his own profession was not worth trying. The first success also prompted others to join the elite detachment. But the deputy leader replied that there is no place in the guild and others should not waste it. At the last moment, David decided to try his fate and asked if the warriors concerned. But the guy got the expected reaction. He was answered, in this world only power was important. The warrior heard the envious conversations of other contenders and understood that he was even in vain. Unexpectedly for himself, he caught a conversation that there will be a raid on the Black Dragon today. The guy was already turning away from surprise. This den was the largest dungeons of the level S in the city. S. There was a bunch of small and powerful creatures. Death there, only loss of level and experience and equipment. The Black Dragon was the boss of the dungeon. The 99th level forced the Guild S level to give him everything that had. The same guild is filled with high skills hunters. Probably that they will be able to win. The admiration of the guy disappeared and again despair from his abandoned fate. Suddenly, the system reported that it is the perfect carrier of the spirit and the connection would soon take place. David did not have time to get out of the boss loading. The goal is not to let the players into the dungeon. The notifications came continuously. He barely had time to read them. The warrior offered to activate the body. The guy knew how the raiders were forming a team, so he anticipated that he could gain a lot of experience. Is he still able to become incredibly strong? But there were risks to die without it. David's reflections interrupted another notification demanding that you choose immediately. Under the soulless checkup, the guy decided that death in his case was not so scary. Without thinking, he pressed the consent. Inside, the warrior believed in what he could handle. A moment later, teleportation and merger with the body of the boss were activated. A few seconds and David found himself in the Zemil of the Black Dragon. In front of him were only dragons of different levels, which seemed strangely small to him. Among them stood a man in a hood who welcomed his ruler with awakening. Here, David was a king. Only after such an appeal did the guy realize that he became a Black Dragon. He got acquainted with the characteristics of this body. They were impressive. Mighty players could destroy a maximum of one of the attributes, but the dragon's power itself was as many as 3,000 points. The downs were also added to the damage to 80% in absorption of opponents' attributes. Exclusive skills, body strength, gave David unheard of freedom. He could now assure someone else's experience and rapidly increase his level. The guy did not realize as it turned out, but the dragons bowed his heads frightened, fearing his anger. He seems to have healed. David ordered his subordinates to get up as a real boss. The man in the hood began to praise him and emphasize that in the future, the king would destroy humanity. Next to him, the guy saw a cage with a prisoner girl who was definitely not happy to awaken. She began to ask him for liberation and threatened the revenge of the elves. The look like an NPC. The guy looked at the captive with interest. By this point, he never saw the living elf. His observation was interrupted by an earthquake. From the girl's reaction, David realized that the battle was about to begin. The Elfian saw the eye of the dragon directed to it. Until now, they were not paid attention. It was strange. Finally, it was possible to see the opponents. The guy saw that he was the same guild of hunters for perfume. The enemies were serious, and David decided to ensure the dragon's eye. He needed help. The leader of the detachment of hunters encouraged their team. They seemed to be confident in their abilities. The sky was filled with subordinates of the Black Dragon, and members of the guild began battle. Players went around low-level dragons, leaving their technique. They had a tactic. Gradually, the hunters' detachment moved forward. David has the idea how to complicate their lives, to teleport a dragon with high characteristics. This elite warrior was 99th. Such a giant will finally make the opponents full. Now, no advancement in language could not be defended. The detachment had to be defended. On the battlefield, rolling was made. The tactics of hunters changed. And finally, one of the archers managed to cause great damage to the enemy. David realized that one warrior would not cope with the hunters of the guild. The same opinion was the Euron. Weighing all the pros and cons, he decided to send an ambulance. 6 new dragons in addition to the first were a wave of misunderstanding among the opponents. The detachment members were not afraid of a joke, because the newcomers were also elite warriors. Everyone asked the leader about a further plan of action. He, in turn, quickly thought of how best to do. After a few seconds, he made another motivational speech, calling only to move forward. He ordered the rebuilding of the system and divide the monsters. The battle tasked with renewed. This behavior forced David to think even harderly about the further plan of action. The Elfian rejoiced. The level of this team was not enough to defeat the boss. Suddenly, the guy saw that the enemy was no longer moving in his direction. Something changed. This prompted the warrior to examine the environment, and soon he saw the heart of the dragon killer. This news forced the boss of rage from rage. As it is a strategy, a smart tactic could weaken it. The cage of the captive was protected by the wings of the dragon. The girl realized that he could leave the den. There was no other option. It should prevent hunters in person. The players already knew about the artifact, so he needed to hurry. As if anticipating the troubles, the team members began to be interested in the head of the detachment about the reliability of the repository. But the chairman assured that materials and weapons are safe. The leader was also convinced that the boss would not interfere with them because he had no intelligence at all. A self-confident guy considered a black dragon only a step in the way of their guild. Such confidence of the elder made the hunters relax. But at the same moment, their heads covered a huge shadow of the boss dungeon. Immersed in his thoughts, the detachment leader did not immediately realize what was happening. But in a second, surprise changed fright. The enemy was extremely large. The black dragon blocked the path to artifact. This situation needed quick decisions because panic grew like a snowy coma. Realizing that he had a detachment of opponents, David decided to apply his skills. But unexpectedly, the boss suffered a counterattack that slightly reduced its energy. The hunter leader was able to cope with his anxiety and activated one of his skills. He ordered his people to kill a black dragon and get everything they wish. David realized that the opponents were not going to retreat. The detachment commander began to quickly give orders to his associates. Also looking at the enemy, he added that the hunters were careful with the dragon's tail. But his warnings were in vain because no one managed to navigate on time. David struck. The king of the dragons decided that he would not give opponents of a break. The same fiercely reflected. The hunter was not forgotten about protection. They believed that the boss used his most powerful skill. The members of the guild decided to apply all their force to the counter, offensive while treating the wounded. David decided in this case to focus on his defense. On his side, a variety of high-power attacks began to fly. The detachment commander was not going to stop, and at the first wave of the attack immediately ordered to prepare for the second. But the skills of the boss were so strong that any attack could not cause him serious harm. The group had noted that the dragon no longer uses skills, so you need to attack the plan. David, in turn, perceived all their power as tickling. He was fascinated by their courage, but time was to finish this fight. The black dragon flew into the air. After a moment, all the hunters disappeared in the flame. None of them expected it. The warrior was satisfied with himself. He coped with such a powerful guild. The head wanted to fight further, but did not see that the detachment was gone. Looking back, the guy saw the giant muzzle of the boss dungeon. Everything was over. On the helpless cries of the enemy, David only opened his mouth with another portion of flames. Finally disappearing in an orange glow, the hunter leader promised to return. It took a few seconds, and the system has processed David's experience of victory in the battle. The dragon reached the maximum level. The next should be transformation. The characteristics were striking. The next one had to be information about the equipment. David saw that there was a count. The achievements of this battle were impressive. Platinum and 3 diamond objects. The hunters were also lost onions, which caused significant damage. At the auction, it will cost a whole fortune. The guy flipped everything and flipped the tape of new achievements, but it seems to her. Suddenly, David's eyes got a gem that cleaned restrictions on level. He was already trying to try the object. In fact, such an upgrade was impossible a few hours ago. The system reported that time to return to its body. A few seconds, David was teleported to his room. Externally, he was the same boy, but in fact, his characteristics increased many times. The warrior felt a tremendous power between the 20th and 1st level was significant. After all that happened, the guy felt that he needed to rest and restore strength. The next day in the Guild of the Spirits, all were amazed by the decrease in the level of the head. The worst was that John had to justify himself for a failed operation. Also, Sam's archer was seriously wounded and lost his weapon. John solemnly vowed to rub into the powder of everyone and everyone who was guilty of a failed operation. The Main urgently wanted to get answers to all his questions and somehow compensate for the loss. While in the guild, the hunters were raging from rage. Delivery came to the orphanage. At first, it was perceived as a mistake, but it turned out that all these things were purchased by David. Carrie ran among the boxes in joy and did not see how several of them began to fall on her. Looking up and understanding her mistake, the girl called on the spot. The catastrophe would be inevitable if David did not save the position. A few minutes later, all the children of the shelter came to the boy, greeting him. The guy did not spread about where he had money for such expensive purchases. The managers concerned about whether the guy was going to join the guild hunters on demons. David happily replied that the monsters were not frightened and hurried to say goodbye, because things were not waiting. The grandfather stayed with the children. Thinking about the strange behavior of the boy, he woke up. To the ears of the warrior, passages of conversations about the failure of the Hunters Guild were coming on the road. Everyone knew this story. It turns out the Celestial Pavilion sold the battle strategy in his dungeon, which the hunters lost. So the guy realized that the next opponents would be members of the pavilion. The guy's reflection on new artifacts interrupted Liam. This time the guy just climbed into a fight, getting into trouble. Subiaka began to generate some spell, saying that this time David would not save. But these threats were interrupted by the enemy's fist in the face. Liam flew a good distance and was deprived of almost all of his energy with one blow. David looked at the scoundrels of the scoundrel, showing all the appearance that he could continue. But it did not go away for a few seconds as a brazen, without looking back, he was heed. Not where the boy's back appeared behind his back and asked if he had a question. David said he had the desire to go to the portal, and the girl invited him to follow. She could not understand where the guy had a powerful aura of the 20th level because he was a newcomer. They soon reached the statue of displacement that impressed their size. The guide advised to take the task for 3 stars. Because it is more difficult, the guy would not pull. From her point of view, the 3-star task will pull the warrior, but it is his ceiling. The guy activated the system that announced the start of data transfer to select the task. A few seconds in the face of David, the whole list and even the task of 5 stars. He carefully read the conditions of this task, and they were very interested in it. The guide explained that this task is very difficult, and no one took it during the year. She insisted that her task was to help choose the right level for all participants. The 5th complexity included the destruction of all available monsters together with the boss alone. However, 100 points in the soul were tempted for the guy. The guide was not going to go anywhere. She wanted to make sure that the ward's choice. But the girl did not have time to relax as the system announced that the guy chose a task for 5 stars. David explained that in his opinion, this task suits him more than everyone else. The guy assured that he would return earlier in the allotted time, and she may not worry about him. But the girl was so shocked that she could not hold back emotions, it was necessary to report. In the center of teleportation had to be delayed for technical reasons, and David had a chance to study the map. In the same hall, David Linda's classmate with his sister on the Ghost Goods, Kendi, was stuck. Suddenly, the girl's eye caught on a familiar boy in the crowd. It caused a great surprise. Kendi undertook to interrogate her sister and replied that yesterday, together with David, they received a profession. The teleport was launched, but the guy was in the queue of experienced players. Though he was a newcomer, this is a mistake. But the girl did not have time to warn the friend. She saw that the warrior was entering the portal. After a second, David was in the moonlight. It was a rather interesting world. But the guy did not have time to see everything around. he was immediately attacked by one of the monsters. He managed to evade and saw himself opposite the 20th level of Azure. The first rival was quite dangerous, but fortunately, the guy had good equipment. A giant flame sword of platinum level and a fragment of boundless gems. On the eve of the guy drilling, and now he has a little less than 60 million. But instead, he could now sell the extraordinary bow of Sam. He can buy it. The warrior knew that low-level monsters were stupid, so such wolves would rush to him. Waiting for a large number of opponents, the guy used his sword. David decided to save his time and call monsters of different classes with the help of an artifact. And after 5 minutes, everyone who heard the signal came to the clearing. The stone had an extraordinary effect. Wasting time, the guy drank baptism of flames to create a firestorm and kill everyone at once. The wolves fell one by one on the ground and no longer moved. But the guy did not have time to end his predecessors, as about 100 enemies came to the clearing. Meanwhile, other hunters wandered the empty jungle in the hope of finding at least for the battle. One of the hunters suddenly realized that someone in this location used a stone that causes monsters. This is not how the company is outraged, and they decided to study the brazen that he did so dishonestly. Suddenly, a fiery pillar of huge power came from the jungle cell to heaven. Seeing this sight, all the passion of revenge suddenly disappeared. Every hunter had his own business. A few minutes later, everything was over in the lawn. The system reported general progress. This mission was not so complicated, though the guy was slightly waving. There were several players near the boss's den, and at least Trinity was needed to win this battle. The boys were in anticipation of good rewards for victory and gradually developed a strategy. But their plans were not destined to come true because David came to the clearing. The hunters decided to use the boy as a bait because they thought he was new. Suddenly, all the dungeons began to moan as if from an earthquake. But this was the appearance of angry boss wolves, all of which increased by 30%. Such a fury of Alpha Wowka made the hunters a little to make. They became scared. But one of them, the boldest, decided, however, to act according to plan and use David as a bait. The boy stopped only a flame that escaped from the stranger's sword and killed the boss. David stood over the cut of the giant and expected the system to calculate the progress. It was easy. For the victory over the boss, the guy received an artifact that can enhance the effect of silver weapons. The hunter dared to offer to pick up the artifact if he was not needed, David. The warrior, threatening that sword, made it clear that he knew about the dishonest plans of the cunning. David believed that if hunters need something, they should earn it alone. Other, less arrogant magicians could still not depart from the fact that this boy had been cut down by a boss with one blow. Soon David returned to the girl. The guide and the questions fell on him. Undoubtedly, the information that he was tested had the effect of a torn bomb. The guide even checked the test results on the monitor, but everything was the way the newcomer said. Such a result was incomprehensible, especially since the system did not showcase. David asked about his privileges and the guide suggested following her. She liked the guy. Soon they approached the giant statue again. The guy made a step forward and felt his body endowed with powerful energy. The warrior received the aura with a class advancement. It was a special reward. Aura could change the color too: white, green, blue, and purple, depending on the complexity of the task. This time, David's wrist shined the orange aura of the highest level. He became a warrior. With every second, the boy's level increased more, and the indicators grew constantly. The 20th Mint Warrior immediately moved to 34th and received a book of spells. The book had an epic level. It was a weapon, the harm of which it grew in proportion to the indicators of the soul. David was fascinating from such a skill. Now he could create any weapon by the power of thought. The guide said that now the boy's name would be engraved on the walls of the temple. He is a special guest. The rector of the temple intervened in the conversation and suggested to talk about the privileges of special guests. She released the guide girl and suggested that David personally hold. The woman suggested going to talk to a room for special guests. And after a second, having taken hands, they were teleported to the destination. The abbot was amazed by the boy's power. She believed that he was much more powerful than her. Over the last 10 years, no one has been able to accomplish such difficulty. So now, as a special guest, he has available discounts and a monthly payment of 10 million. David sweat on his forehead. Also, the guy could now join the guild a level. It was not necessary, but after the entry, he could receive reliable protection from his team. The guy understood that it was a profitable solution, given his fleeting path to rise. David considered an entry into the guild only the first step towards becoming a king of the region. At this point, there were 2 guilds of level A. The woman offered the Guild of Hunters for Spirits. The other was the Guild of the Phantom Cloud, the main competitor of the first. These were a little weaker. The woman did not have time to finish the sentence, as David had already announced that he was ready to join the Phantom Cloud. The abbot of the temple began to design in the guild, but noted that she had to tell something. Only women were members in the guild that the guy elected. In the Phantom Cloud, at the same time, her level leader in the level of the level was sad. The girl was named Abigail. Adeline, who had a level A, was dissatisfied with such a brazen girl's behavior. Despite the fact that Abigail ignored her responsibilities, she had to at least meet a newcomer. The newcomers were Candy and Linda, who were finally able to teleport. But unexpectedly cute conversations were interrupted by a dissatisfied scream at Adeline. The girl announced that their guild was joined by a guy who completed the task of 5 stars. This application cannot be canceled. It will have to meet. By the way, Adeline called it David. When asked if they are not familiar, Linda said she knew the boy with this name, but he has 1 level. The conversation was interrupted by Bella. Hunters behind the spirits lost in the dungeon of the Black Dragon. She also noted that she found Sam's weapon at the auction and decided to play a little. She said that she raised the price so high that the hunters of the spirits had to spend a lot. By his actions, the girl brought Sam to tears. He solemnly vowed that the Black Dragon of his evil enemy. 14 billion is a very serious amount, but it was not a reason to snoop the nose. In the end, Luke Sam was redeemed and time was back to business again. Around the same time, at a meeting, the head of the strategic group of the Celestial Pavilion discussed tactics. They passed this dungeon 5 times and repelled from it. There should be no mistakes. This time, the behavior of the Black Dragon did not meet the strategy. John insisted on what the truth was saying. Bert is a 5-star shadow killer, called John and his team with idiots that blame others. He insisted that the hunters should take their losing dignity or train better. The chairman Bruce noted that the pavilion would never allow himself to sell false information. He suggested that the 4 attendees tomorrow to go for intelligence in the dungeon. They agreed. In the same second, the door opened and a black foggy shell entered the hall. Jack did not understand who it was and why the arrogance had such an important meeting. Bruce said to stay alone and introduced Glue from the headquarters of the Celestial Pavilion. He noted that it should be worn before going to the fortress of the Black Dragon. Bruce apologized for such arrogance, but Glue noted that he would go with his group. This 5-star necromantian was delighted with the fact that he could absorb the soul of the Black Dragon. John was satisfied in any case. Either survive someone alone or at all. The night came and David, lying in her bed, lazily flipped through the women's chat of her new guild. Suddenly, he saw that the price for his bow flew by as much as 40% and decided to sell it. Since the guy was a prominent member of the Alliance, he also got a percentage from above, becoming a billionaire. David had to relax, leaving all the worries for tomorrow. The power was drunk. In the morning, he was announced that a group of murderers of the dungeon went to the dungeon. The guy made a connection with a black dragon and was already ready for a new task. He looked at the captive. He seemed to him a funny pet. David looked at those who were already teleported as part of the research group that were professionals. The fighting power of this group was higher than last time, but while the heart is safe, one should not be afraid. The guy ordered his subordinates to take the soldiers and deal with the violators. He instructed one of his dragons. So far, the research team has not seen any serious obstacles in its promotion. But in a few seconds, the pillar of dust covered the horizon with it. And after a moment, a crowd of dragons of different levels broke through the lawn. John shouted that it was so last time, but now they were more. It seemed to be unexpected. The glue shouted that the whole group would focus on their goals, and it would understand the elite monsters itself. The strength of this group was impressed by David, but the opportunities of that strange magicians remained unknown. The Black Dragon again decided to fight his own person. The dragons who saw the takeoff of their king even felt some dweega, but it was impossible. The Elfian could not understand what was happening to this abnormal dragon before he was different. John insisted that, despite the power of the group, this situation was not included in the strategy. The glue noted that it should not be called professionals if they are not able to cope with the smallness. In response, John said that the case was in the wrong strategy and they should be honest. The necromant became angry and began to threaten the guy with an exhibit of his collection. Bruce tried to reassure all present, insisting that the glue was just an old pervert. John already wanted to see what the necromantic reaction will be when they meet the boss. The guy's desires came to life before he expected. He had to make a quick decision. The whole research group applied David, but they were insignificant. The black dragon was such a powerful power that even professionals could not cope with it. The glue was already heading for the group. It was militant. He struck David's shadow, but there was such a rapid regeneration that the effect did not happen. But the black dragon did not think for a long time and hit, almost killing a necromant. The healers immediately rushed to the magician, trying to heal. David decided not to give them dissent and apply the breath of extermination. It was a surprise. But despite such a technique, the magician still remained alive. The members of the group began to suspect that the dragon was able to study them and adjust their tactics. When the recovery of the magician ended, he decided to end the boss alone. The necromant began to evoke an ancient soul from the other world. A few seconds before David, a dragon Maltus put. The guy knew that only a high-level necromant could call the boss. It was a bone dragon. The glue ordered him to attack and two bosses were crossing in a duel. The enemy was very strong, but David was able to knock him out of the track with the first blow. When Malthus had dizziness, he kissed the black dragon with a corpse cloud. But he managed to navigate in time and directed his breathing. Two powerful forces met in the lawn, but the black dragon was stronger. By this point, John has never seen such spectacular battles. The necromantic was very powerful, but the black dragon himself has not yet shown all his power. He hit with more power. After a second with the bone dragon, he thought at least David so. Malthus suddenly grabbed him by his paw. The necromanta smiled ominously. His fresh corpses could not disappear so much into oblivion. In one movement, the bone dragon dropped David to the ground and caused him significant harm. The blow was pouring behind the blow and David hurried to escape from the arms of death. The black dragon flew into the sky rapidly, and a miracle was overlooked by serious troubles. This fact was very appropriate because David realized that Malthus could not fly. The glue ordered the bone dragon to attack from distance, as there were no other options. David, playing, evaded the shots. Suddenly, the necromant realized that he was in danger and called his dragon to defense. But it was too late. The black dragon released its charge. Despite the power of the impact, the necromant still has 20% of health. The members of the group quickly found the victim, and having made a protective barrier, began healing. They were not going to flee because they expected good news from their messenger Bert. In the heat of the fight, David even did not realize that he disappeared from the battlefield. A moment Hiller noticed that Bert was returning. All were anticipated by victory, but for joy there was no reason. It was the same dragon that had a special task. He coped with him and brought his king the dragon's heart. Despite Bruce's envy and curse, David touched the artifact. After a second, the level of the fortress of the black dragon changed from diamond to star. In the guild, hunters were concerned about the spike of spiritual energy of the hidden kingdom. No one could have thought that it could have influenced the world probably. Something great was coming. Meanwhile, in the same hidden kingdom, a group of researchers did not know how to respond to it. David himself also increased his level. He has a new skill in a fiery tongue. She could prohibit the resurrection of any player. The heart of the dragon was capable of it. The guy thought whether this dragon had to have such force from the outset. Although he was still interested in the possibility of growing his avatar, now everything has begun to change. And then this chaos finally wedged Bert with the news that did not find the heart of the killer of the dragons. Suddenly, he saw such a desirable object in the paw of the boss of dragons and forgot about everything. He did not listen to anyone, though Bruce screamed him to stop and not to do nonsense. The guy believed that he was faster than this dragon, but was very mistaken. The boss, the wing of the black flame, killed him like an annoying fly. John asked Bruce what to do now. He replied that they were lacking people. That is why they should not continue the battle. You need to run immediately from this dungeon. The glue did not share this opinion of the group leader. He wanted to continue the struggle. The detachment members have already seen the portal ahead, but David was not going to let them go. A moment later, the boss of the dragons was landing on the ground in front of Bruce and blocking the exit. He did not allow the opponents to be ashamed and applied the breath of destruction against them. This time, no barrier resisted such power. The group's capabilities were almost zero. Bruce ordered everyone to put their valuable things in the infinity ring to save if they die. But the glue had his own plan. He decided not to give up and resist the boss of the dungeon. He called the Legion of Dead Souls, headed by a bone dragon. Together they rushed to David, who was not frightened at all. He destroyed the less powerful ones with one wave of his wings, and the breath of the bone dragon this time could not even squeeze his skin. With one quick movement, he broke the enemy into the bones. The necromantian in anger promised to return again to torment the dragon until it absorbs him. He regretted that it would be impossible to repeat the same experience, and it would be necessary to start first. These enemy words forced David to think about the test of his new skill. In a few seconds, the necromant turned into a complete fiery dome. Stunned by the pain, the glue promised that the next time he would pay for it. But soon he realized that his health had reached zero. The rebirth did not occur. When everything was over, the system reported David that he received an extraordinary amount of experience. The group that managed to get out of the dungeon sat in complete silence, waiting for the results of the battle. It took a few minutes before the room broke into the room. Bruce asked him about the glue. The guy replied that there were no news. Either the system makes an error or the necromant died. These words struck the team members like a thunder in the clear sky. They understood that no matter how high the level of glue, the power of the King of the Dragons was extraordinary. Bruce realized that the King of the Dragons was destroyed only by the Master of the Necromant and released them. The evening fell into the city and David finally could lie on his sofa. The awards for battle with this guild were very attractive. These guys were fabulously rich. But more than David was like the dagger, Shadow, Thirst for Blood, and a scroll of the legendary skill. The boy realized that he was really lucky this time. His trophies were extremely powerful, and the warrior mag was able to raise his rating up to 40. David was interested in whether he managed to destroy the necromanta irrevocably. The system answered in the affirmative. It caused warmth to the soul. If it was not so intelligent, then it would probably have already died. The system explained that the boss without the avatar will act according to the established rules. With it, will have consciousness. You can also switch to a stronger boss if you kill the first level boss. The artifact was top. Dragon's heart is a key element for killing a black dragon. Its next goal. The guy decided that now was the time for the next transformation and went on the road. The abbot of the temple expected David under the interested views of other players. Seeing the boy, she was greeted, and he was very surprised by her striking awareness. The girl explained that the transformation statue launched light, a signal that an important person would come. A few minutes later, David chose a new task for 5 stars, to clean 2 dungeons. Usually a team is required to complete such tasks, but it should be one here. The warrior mag looked back on the rector and asked her to give the card a silver-level dungeon. A few seconds, the scroll with the map was in the guy's hand. Finally, the woman warned him, explaining about increasing complexity in some regions. David thanked the reminder and asked if he could find 2 silver dungeons. Indeed, this task was not easy. There was a crowd of players at every location. Many were enthusiastic. Checking the map, the guy realized that there should be an entrance to the Cave of Suffering in front. But looking into the distance, in the horizon, the guy saw another crowd of people. He saw familiar faces. Some of these people would not like to meet. Linda tried to repel Liam, who tried to break into the location without a cue. This scum again brought himself very brazen, citing the power of his group. David was very surprised that the girl also joined the Phantom Cloud. A coincidence? But it is even good because he was definitely not going to leave this dungeon, Liam. One of Liam's associates had already dragged his paws to a girl with lusty offers. Suddenly, the scoundrel stopped the sword directed in the face. Audrey, the master of the guild sword, the Phantom Cloud, said that he would retreat, otherwise regret. The giant Charles, a master of martial arts behind which Liam was hiding, pointed to the swords in her place. There were no motivation of the girl to adequately talk. These guys understood only force. Audrey had a conflict with himself. If you go into battle with them, it will lose, and if not, it is unknown. Suddenly, the help came from where they did not expect. David announced the battle. Linda was embarrassed from such an unexpected meeting. They have not seen themselves since teleportation. Liam reacted as he was, and inherently, he began to provoke the boy. He referred to the giant who stood behind his back, and he, in turn, threatened the massacre. David, it seems, did not bother at all. He approached the girls, not paying attention to the bullies. Audrey asked Linda whether they were familiar with this newcomer, and answered that they were classmates. The question, did he get lost? He replied that 2 transformation requires a silver-level dungeon. Liam believed that David was lying and insisting that the guy opened his private information. Davida was just laughing. He used a deadly punishment for players below the 10th level. He struck the crazy and until he flew, ordered him to return to the city. Liam has not yet had time to fly to the ground, but already saw that his health was at 0. Someone guards rushed to the aid of their murdered comrade and was too late. But Charles decided to attack the arrogant stranger to show who was stronger. Although the attack was without warning, David managed to evade. The giant promised to send the guy following Liam, but he got his sword. Returning to the girls, the guy noted that they could also join this fight. Audrey also perceived it for arrogance, promised to deal with David finally. The girl and the giant try to attack the warrior at the same time, but the guy at high speed, lightning failed with Charles. From the last forces, the giant used against the enemy the strike of a thunderous tiger. This attempt was in vain because David was able to repel him with a sword and sent a giant to flight. The next one was Audrey's turn, who decided to attack her back, but hit the protective shield. Whatever the power of her blow, the protective shield even did not shake. This guy is full of secrets. Suddenly, Charles woke up from knockout somewhere on the rowing rocks. He threatened that he would not retreat until David died. But the guy simply was no longer for that time. He sent fire to the enemy. After a second, one problem was solved and David earned his experience. The warrior mag returned to Audrey and asked if she really wanted to fight him. The girl immediately changed his anger to mercy and replied that they had no claims after that. David replied that it was, even good, because they were members of one guild and it would be ugly. Without waiting for the answer, the guy said they would tell the leader it was a dungeon. David realized that not taking into account the fortress of the Black Dragon, he first goes to the dungeon. A few minutes later, he saw a goblin, which aimed at him from the bow. After reflecting the first arrow, the guy even somehow removed from the fact that he was the first opponent of the dungeon. Another goblin, meanwhile, decided to attack David from behind and put a sword into it. But the guy managed to turn around, grasp the enemy for his throat, and threw him in the arc. Thus, the warrior magu managed to successfully eliminate two enemies simultaneously. David realized that if it were not such a quick reaction, he would have been in a deadly mess at the beginning. In all previous battles, he mostly relied on his capabilities, but now they need skills. This is a dungeon is an ideal opportunity for testing a new demonic blade skill. After a little more in the cave, the guy collided with a couple of new enemies. These two faced the properties of the new skill and rejected them, breaking the weapon. It was a shield. In a second, without letting the enemies be reached, the guy formed a hammer and struck. Another 3 downshore archers came to the assistance of the attackers. But the guy was still faster than them and had time to jump, forming a crossbow. In flight, he released 3 arrows that hit the target. He was already strongly straining these hidden attacks. It was necessary to hurry. David saw and felt that a whole pursuit of wolves and goblins had formed behind him. He decided to end this crowd with one blow and applied a 40-meter sword against them. It turned out that this skill was versatile to be applied to long, distance, and near distances. Finally, a few minutes later, David was able to reach the final boss in this den, a white tiger. Although he was angry, David still noticed that the tiger was not conscious. The guy decided in this case to test the same skill of demonic blade. After a second after the jump, the boss began to crumble into glass fragments. For a while, the system announced the guy that it was cleared. Since he had nothing more, David went to the exit. At the entrance to the cave, the guy saw Audrey and Linda, who hid from him behind a large stone. The girls did not understand how a boy who had recently woke up could be so strong. They were afraid of him. Soon David found another dungeon and was able to defeat the boss there, a blood-inflamed Alka. The system announced the fulfillment of a 5-star task and unlocked a hidden mission. It was not a necessary task, but it could be obtained by good bonuses. The 5% increase in all attributes and the legendary book of skills were very interested in David. In this dungeon, the average level of monsters exceeded 40, 2 for anyone. David felt time to unlock the star-level weapons and contact the blacksmith grossmester. The guy remembered where the branch of the heavenly pavilion was, and it was time for some to visit. The warrior mag was an interesting reaction of the celestial pavilion to a black card of membership in the Alliance X. After a while, David was already amazed by the number of people who wanted to buy strategies. He was nervous because, so to speak, he joined the rows of innovators, just selling his things. The players in the queue for the desired purchases quarreled. Among them, David noticed Bruce and Bert. The latter asked the first whether it was possible to return his weapon. The head replied that due to the fall of the glue headquarters, she discovered mercy for them and did not bother. To the remark that Bert demands too much, he exploded because he did not want to start again. David, to whom the chair arrived in the head, the guy said to calm down. The warrior mint insisted that he needed to behave within the allowable and not offend others. The shadow killer replied that the usual beginner was not so brazen. Bruce tried to quench his subordinate, and David thought that next time the Black Dragon was settling. In his voice, the guy said that he was disappointed with the behavior of the pavilion with guests. Bruce replied that their group has a high level and they do not sell strategies to David's dungeons. Bert continued to fight, but David suddenly pulled a black member's card in the Alliance X. The Shadow Killer knocked out the item from the guy's hands, not understanding what artifact before him. But after a moment, both hunters froze, affected by the appearance of the main manager. The man was named Benjamin. He looked at those present and lifted a card from the floor. A few seconds, the heavy hand of the control dropped on the face of Bert. He fell to the ground. Despite the shouts of the killer, Benjamin respectfully apologized to David. The men noted that the guy was a very young owner of the membership card. Returning to his subordinates, the manager ordered to treat the guy properly. Grabbing Bert for the cloak, he pulled him to the exit, promising to show the next dungeon. David asked Bruce about the location of the blacksmiths and where you can buy gems here. The guy also added that the money is not worried at all. When David showed a bag with gold, Bruce himself agreed to bring precious stones. The warrior was interested in the courtesy of the chief manager in the capital. He became an interesting in history of the temple. After a while, David was already heading to the most masterful blacksmith in the city. Wherever he went, he was always talking about the dungeon of the Black Dragon. The death of the necromantian forced all researchers with a warning to treat this dungeon. He decided to hurry and, after a few minutes, opened the door of the workshop. Master Darren was engaged in work, and Clary and Chloe stood from the guild Yun. David politely greeted and asked what the girls were doing here. Claire rushed to him with a million questions about his personal life. The gust of the girl was stopped by Chloe, which recommended David to go to the usual smithy with his level. The guy scratched his back and replied that he was not hearing this for the first time. A moment later, he got a star level and a gemstone, which struck the audience. Even the blacksmith forgot about his affairs. He has not seen such weapons for a long time. The master assured that he would invest all his work in strengthening these weapons. Working on an upgrade of weapons boiled with unprecedented force. The entire workshop was illuminated by flame stars, the effect of strengthening the star-level weapons. Chloe noticed that David was not surprised at all. Probably the guy is not the first time. Claire noticed such interest in her sister and perceived it as a sign of sympathy. David, listening to these girlish chats, realized that he seems to be wrong with the choice of guild. It took a few hours of painstaking work, and Kaval announced that the weapon was ready. In addition to everything, the master noted that today he felt the influx of strength, so he did everything for free. David disagreed with this and transferred $1 billion to the blacksmith's account, promising frequent visits. The man liked the behavior of a new client. He was already waiting for the next meeting. Both girls were amazed by the generosity and nobility of a mysterious stranger. A few hours from the second mission for those who passed the second transformation. With his new weapon, his power could compete with the power of the fourth transformation master. In the end, David drank several elixirs that improved his performance and jumped into the abyss. Soon the guy faced the first enemies, a flying mouse and offended soldier. For David, such opponents were childish fun. He destroyed them with a double blow. This basic skill, intensified by such weapons, had an extremely strong effect. The guy was not going to pass the map through. He planned to break through with the help of a fiery stroke. After the drunk elixir, David soon found himself near the boss cave, the level of which was from 50. Moving into the depth of the cave, the guy saw that the monsters were getting smaller on the way. When the warrior came out, he saw in the heart of the mountain of sleeping, mutated beast. This monster was from the race of the undead and had 55 level. David realized that it was time to pump clairvoyance. This would help to cope with bosses, which little is known in this case. He struck. And although the damage increased by 300%, the monster only became more angry with the guy. The mutant opened his mouth and started shooting the boy with energy balls. David only did that he had time to evade. The guy applied all his possible strength and speed to carry a series of short blows in response. Tightening the fight is risky, so it was not possible to wrest the monster in David. This tactic was obtained, and the guy got an old key for this mission. In addition, the warrior received some unknown rotten flesh, the properties of which were unclear. David decided not to think about it and returned to the class change. A moment later, the bonuses of the system fell on the guy, which he distributed between force and spirit evenly. In the end, the warrior mint gained a legendary dual destruction blade. When David returned to the temple, he was greeted with the completion of the second transformation of the abbot. She told about new bonuses and asked what the boy's plans now. He wanted only a rest. But in fact, David still wanted to visit the pavilion and buy something for the murder of the Black Dragon. Meanwhile, in the capital, Benjamin discussed with Bruce and Bert a new raid to the Black Dragon dungeon. Part of the plan this time became gifts from the headquarters, life rings that activate the resurrection. Benjamin relied on Bruce and his team, and if not, then in love would go with them. The conversation of this trio was interrupted by a female power voice. All those present looked back to the door. In the office, there was a lord of animals and, in combination, the daughter of the owner of the Heavenly Pavilion, Daisy. In order not to leak information, the girl did not specifically tell anyone about her intentions. Daisy powerfully stated that from now on, no one can go to the fortress of the Black Dragon without her permission. And to make it even more understandable, she asked the manager whether he agreed to challenge her father. After receiving an obvious answer, the girl ordered her to provide information about this dungeon. Benjamin did not expect this person's visit and was genuinely satisfied with the fact that he finally went. This lady entered the World Beast Association at a young age and was very talented. She came here to defeat the Black Dragon and become the best master of animals on the mainland. That is why it is necessary to obey all its orders and familiarize with the management of the basics of training of dragons. But in a few seconds, Bruce and Bert realized that this management was bought in David. The manager was interested in why the guy was this book. Bruce suggested asking her to return. But he believed that it was inappropriate because there would be unnecessary noise. There are other sources of information. In the evening, David, sitting in his room, carefully studied the leadership on the basics of training of dragons. Finally, the guy reached the page with information about the Black Dragon. Judging by the written, the search team could not evaluate all the characteristics of this boss. But there was something that surprised him. Only 3 Black Dragons were found throughout the territory. David's winged boss was the only one who survived today. It turns out that a piece of meat he received for a quest affects the growth period of the Black Dragon. If even the Pavilion of Heaven marked this meat as a valuable artifact, it is indeed a treasure. But the most important thing is that David could now allow the dragon to eat meat and become stronger. So it will come to the 4th transformation, but for a long time this rapid increase will not last. The system reported that in the event of the boss's death, the guy would get a dragon as a pet. David imagined the face of the members of the guild when he would call such a pet in their eyes. In any case, the upgrade of the guy now depends only on the power of the boss. It must be preserved. And you need to start acting right now, especially since new messages have appeared in the guild. It was about the secret kingdom of the Diamond Period. There was a raid, and David decided to join. His message in the girl's chat again made a noise. David was not used to such a tumultuous reaction. Adeline told the guy that monsters were too dangerous, but he was confident in his abilities. The next morning, members of the John Hunter's group decided to go through a drowsy forest. The secret kingdom was worse than a black dragon's den, and Yoon was able to pass. They are now the first, and the gap continues to increase, but the hunters still had a chance to compare the score. John was determined. He wanted to kill competitors to feel the taste of despair. The secret kingdom of Giant Drowsy Forest was to open in 35 minutes. During the waiting under the gate, many people gathered. Such locations open once a year. Guilds, which will be in the top 3, will receive valuable resources, is a chance to express themselves. David realized that there would be cruel rivalry between the Guild of the Phantom Cloud and Hunters for Spirits. And judging by the arrogant behavior of members of the Rivals Guild, they were not going to give up so simply. The boys saw the members of the guild that were weaker than the hunters rush to disappear from their eyes. David was wondering that his long-standing acquaintances were planning. They wanted to intercept the Phantom Cloud. In his reflections, the guy did not notice how one of the members of the Guild of Opponents drew attention to him. The warrior mag explained that their affairs were not interested in him, but the arrogant stalker began to push. These actions provoked David to a decisive response, which is why the crash shouted at pain. Finally, the guy applied his strength and threw the enemy as far from the lawn. Stalker's flight trajectory was a long and full obstacle. In the end, the guy landed under the next tree. He no longer posed. John approached David and asked why he did it. He replied that he was just defending himself. The Sam's Archer could not keep his emotions. He considered it anything, but not self-defense. But the leader of the detachment of hunters behind the spirits reassured his brother and agreed to close his eyes. John understood that this stalker was at least a 4th transformation. They did not need problems. Finally, David saw members of his guild and was headed by Adeline with his own person. She immediately paid attention to the opponents and could not resist the fall. The girl believed that John specifically decided to interfere with them because he did not cope with the den. These words of the girl forced the leader of the opponents to laugh. He noted that they were not going to pass the gate. Suddenly, someone's energy rays flew towards John. This Chloe decided to attack the enemy with cold air. She did not like empty chats. But it seems that only this guild hunters for the spirits and expected they prepared for a fight. David saw everything and decided to conflict, inquirement with whom they are at all. At the same moment, the attention of Chloe and Claire spilled over his attractive figure. After a few seconds, all members of the Guild of the Phantom Cloud discussed the guy. Adeline politely greeted David, and he apologized for his absence. The girl realized that rather than everything, the guy hid a lot of secrets. Members of the Spirits have finally confirmed their suspicions about who is David. John finally stopped restraining. He exploded with anger, but the warrior responded to it with a smile. The first attack on the opponents was made by Sam Archer. David caught the arrow in the air. After a moment, he had already returned the energy ray of the owner. It was absolutely a surprise for the archer and did not have time to dodge his attack. Angry, John rushed to avenge for humiliation. David perceived such behavior as an attempt to create problems of his guild no more. He wanted the opponents to be responsible for their actions. They reacted to aggression. Realizing that there will be no adequate dialogue, the guy decided to apply a scroll of skills against them. Hunters of spirits have hurried to form a protective pharmacy barrier to reduce the damage. John was convinced that they would not be possible to break their protection, which he stated. But he did it in vain because David decided to increase the attack that twisted the whirlwind above the lawn. Even the girls were amazed by the power of the element, which was lifted by a new member of their guild. What to say about the response of the leader of the opponents? It was a legendary skill. Lightning storms hit the enemies directly, forcing them to disappear. When the spirits with the spirits were over, David suggested entering the secret kingdom. But looking back at his guild, he saw only the amazed face. Adeline and others could not understand how this new man was able to deal with the hunters in a few seconds. But Dakota, one of the girls, managed to draw everything to the little things she saw a blade. Adeline realized that the guy used a combination of scroll, skills, and weapons to destroy the enemy. Chloe noted that if David had only used skills, John would have remained unharmed. It could have been that, today, this warrior mag was the most powerful member of the guild. David decided to repeat his proposal to enter the forest, and this time finally received the answer. There were so tall trees around that the secret kingdom seemed to be extremely suitable. Claire asked if the guy believed that they would be able to go through the dungeon, but he had no doubt. A rabbit jumped out of the shrubs to the lawn, which greatly scared half the group. But the smiles changed quickly to fear when a two-headed bicycle cyst climbed out of the bushes. Adeline immediately rushed to the defense of the group, saying that it was only a small monster. Suddenly, a giant bear appeared on the other side of the lawn. Panic spread among the girls. David decided to come to the rescue, not understanding why he would vote and attract attention. Adeline promised to help the guy when she handled his opponent. But David's auxiliary skills were very useful in such cases. The guy applied a cloud label against the bear, which caused an explosion and great harm. A few minutes later, the team already celebrated a successful cleansing for David the First in the guild. The promotion deep into the location continued in duty with regular murders of monsters. And finally, the queue reached the Red Boss. In this account, in the group was the strategy of the pavilion. David reassured his girlfriends, saying that he had a good anticipation about the final of the battle. Adeline ordered to start, and each participant of the team rushed into a fight. Meanwhile, the manager listened to a report on the battle of two clans near the gate of the drowsy forest. Hearing about the defeat of the hunters, he realized that the Black Dragon's den would pass the Phantom Cloud. Finally, the battle with the boss in the secret kingdom approached the end. Adeline struck. The red giant melted in the flame, leaving the prize artifacts. Adeline said she was now on a debt to the guy for leaving her last blow. The girls rushed to David, assuring that their victory was his merit. And so it is time to look at such a desirable prey. It was not bad. Adeline suggested that he need to take what he needed, but he politely refused. The girls wanted to celebrate such an event. They received the necessary materials for the fifth transformation. David was also offered to join the company. From surprise, he even starred. Suddenly, the guy received a message about the invasion. Urgently had to act. He was in a hurry to say goodbye to the girls and apologize for his absence, jumping into the portal. In the Black Dragon's den, he was expected by the corpses of subordinates. The guy hurried to look at the one who decided to invade his fortress. The opponent turned out to be single, and it seems that he was a magician from the clan of elves. This young man was not so much, so David decided to send elite monsters to him. A few seconds of 3 soldiers and already rushed to the fight with the intention of killing an uninvited guest. This appearance did not scare the stranger at all. He was convinced that he would overcome them. In addition to all this outward, the young man was also very disgusting to the blood, but for the sake of the princess, tolerated. Therefore, he decided not to beat more personally, but to call for the help of a mountain giant. David realized that this arrogant elf easily kills even elite monsters. Suddenly, the guy remembered the stranger's words about the princess and decided to ask her. The girl slept in your cage when the black dragon began to shake her hard. When the captive opened her eyes, David asked her whether she was a really elven princess. The girl was amazed that this giant monster is able to speak in addition to everything. The Elfian was absolutely sure that at the beginning of this monster was not so intelligent. The girl's suspicion changed horror, and she began to shout so that she was not approached or touched. But David had already burst into patience. He clenched her cage with his paw so that the princess would come to her senses. From the fright, the girl immediately revealed that her name is Lily, and the fact that she is the 6th daughter of Queen Edith. David heard about the ruler of the elves. His captive was very promising, Elfian. The guy showed her rescuer to the girl and at first glad. But, looking at, she was worried. She did not like this young man at all. She said that his name Dwight Lawrence and he was still a scum. I wanted to take advantage of it. His family is one of the most influential among elves, but it is not the most popular among the heirs. David told the girl that she was going to give her a boy, but she preferred to die better. The dragon agreed to leave the girl if she told him about the weaknesses of Dwight. Lily was not against such a proposal. She agreed to everything. She said that the members of the Lorenz family have great spiritual strength, but very fragile bodies. Because of this, these elves have long covered themselves with a powerful mana barrier for protection. After these words, the girl despaired completely. She believed that the dragon would not cope. David thought whether he would help him become stronger, that piece of mysterious rotten meat. After its absorption, theoretically, the dragon will go into a new period, but it will only be external protection. Suddenly, the guy remembered weapons, probably human equipment, and the dragon would act. Meanwhile, Lily, in despair, began to ask for the black dragon to let her go. But looked around, she saw that she had remained herself. In fact, David was near her. Just now, he was the body of shadows. He not only excited the shadow murder, but also gained the body of shadows, and also received a double strengthening. Becoming much more powerful, David went to the elf who expected his appearance. Dwight threatened to put banned spells on this place, even sacrificing the princess. But his plan was not destined to come true, because the paw of the black dragon had already begun to fall over it. In one blow, David lost such a formidable opponent. The elf realized the boss could appear so unexpectedly and destroy its protective barrier. But David was not tuned to the conversation. He wanted to complete the beginning. The technique of flames from the hell of the black dragon mercilessly destroyed the enemy. Receiving the next awards and experience, David was satisfied. He did not regret anything. He was very surprised to see the legendary attributes and a prohibited curse among the award. This scoundrel Dwight brought him valuable gifts that could destroy the whole city. Although the guy did not receive the elf's clothes as a reward, he still killed the fat opponent. Meanwhile, Lily was already despaired. She inadvertently began to worry about her abductor. Her sadness was interrupted by the appearance of a black dragon, which made it all around. He explained Lily that Dwight was burned to the background, and the girl could be calm in her life. The Elfian could not believe what he heard. The whole situation with the changes in the dragon became more and more strange. David asked why Lily did not have such powerful abilities, but she is from the royal family. But she replied that in every generation of elves there is a descendant that carries the curse of the king of giants. The dragon realized that the life of a girl was not sugar. He changed her fate without exaggeration. He reached out his paw to the cage, making the girl a lot of frightening. But David's intentions were clean. He wanted to release her. When the emotions fell a little, the guy told Lily that she was free, at least no longer in the cage. Turning to his subordinates, he announced that the girl under his protection. Such an act struck the captive. She does not understand what he needs it for. But the conversation could no longer continue because the black dragon turned off. This time David gained new strength, but at home the surprise was waiting. It turns out that during his absence, almost 100 messages came to his account. Each of the girls seems and in the guild decided to write to him at least something. David only decided to answer Adeline and apologize for going so early. The girl replied that she understands everything. He can have her own things. In addition, the leader of the guild sent him a photo from a party in honor of victory. The next day, the guy accidentally met Linda, who, like him, came to the temple. Thanks to its predecessors, she was able to reach the level 20. The guy was already on the 60th. After learning about it, Linda was upset. Now they were from David from different worlds. The guy praised her achievement. He sincerely believed that the girl was expecting the future. David also added that he would look forward to the day when he can fight with her side by side. This finally melted the latest doubts in Linda's heart. The boy did not pour his nose. A long time later, David had already received a new mission, several tasks in one. The abbot recommended the boy to be more cautious. They were already talking about the red moon. This is a special phenomenon when all the monsters of the secret kingdom become extremely wild and dangerous. There were no patterns of occurrence of such a month. Everything is announced in advance. David did not accept this warning as something important. He completely relied on his strength. The guy's path ran to a dilapidated estate, another secret kingdom. One of the guards of the estate was just sweet after drinking alcohol. Waking up, he saw the crooked moon, but did not worry about it because no one came here. The plans of the man were interrupted by the opening of the teleport. This is not how to be surprised by the trouble, because in his opinion, such an act is complete suicide. David one by one killed opponents not such a high level. According to the boy, the red moon did not hurt his progress at all. But he underestimated this phenomenon, and two new opponents suddenly appeared behind his back. They were the same ghost boys that he already killed, but they had a higher level. This time the opponent was much stronger and faster. Guest boys are very rapidly using powerful techniques. David had to defend himself from almost the last forces, but peak was the moment when they separated from the bodies. It was a great boyfriend. The warrior Mac wanted it to stay away from him as far as possible. To protect himself, David used a demonic blade against opponents. The effect of this skill was struck by the guy. The heads of the attackers were torn into a piece. The system immediately announced that it gradually falls into madness with the loss of points. Finally, the guy appreciated all the warnings he received before coming to this location. Destroying the remains of ghost boys, David decided to be more careful. Tens of minutes, the guy used his most powerful skills to overcome stronger opponents. In the end, he spent a lot of strength and energy, losing points in parallel. It was not time to stop because the new monster broke through the earth. It was a giant corpse, an elite monster. This time, the guy decided not to rely on his own strength. David activated the assistance, which was unpleasantly impressed by the enemy. The wolves quickly forced the giant to fall to the ground. In the moment, the souls of the lunar wolves dealt with the elite monster. Fortunately, these spirits did not have problems recognizing their owner. The guy decided to teach him full for the sake of victory, despite the fact that he was breaking the balance of the game. In the end, David reached the main gate, behind which the boss was. Sticking them with all his strength, the guy shouted to get up because the check came. His eyes were a strange picture, as if it were another NPC scene. The witch in the red cloak asked for ancestor for doing many murders. But in a second, promising to kill even more, she rushed. The intentions of the boss were not destined to come true, because the lunar wolves left only a bloody spot from it. If it weren't for their help, David would be in overflow, and he understood it. To maintain an attribute of such a rank, he needs to become stronger. He received platinum rank equipment, but he could not wear it until 80 levels. Be that as it may, with this location the guy ended. Time was to go. Meanwhile, Daisy boiled from rage. She was tired of expecting the news of the death of those who went to the location. Bert tried to reassure the girl, referring to the red moon. Ordinary people not survive there. But Daisy did not want to hear her interested in information about the guild, who was there. Bruce reported that he asked everyone around, but all the guilds of the rank and B said that there were not their people. The estate under the influence of the red moon reaches a diamond rank, and even Daisy should be cautious. She was curious about why nothing happened. Suddenly, everyone saw that the portal was opening. After a few seconds, a tired and yawning David came to a surprised crowd. The guy did not notice anyone around until he looked up. Warrior Mag did not understand why this group was here. They found his real body. The amazed Bruce, Bert, and Daisy did not understand how this young single one was able to stay there for so long. After a minute of uncomfortable silence, David asked that everyone present had forgotten here. The first one attacked the guard, calling the crazy because of the choice of failed time. When David noted that he did not see the problem, because the kingdom is quite passionate, Daisy intervened in the conversation. The girl wondered if the guy really dealt with the secret kingdom at that time. After the affirmative response, Daisy began to demand the crystal, which David received after the murder of the boss. It caused only laughing. The warrior Mac did not know who this brazen was, but was not going to share. One of Daisy's guards could not stand and ran into the guy for it, saying that he does not know whom she talks to. She called Daisy the youngest genius of the association and the daughter of the owner of the Heavenly Pavilion. Without expressing respect for the girl, the guy ignored her request and should be punished. The guards of the guards stopped Daisy herself, hitting the head with her hand. But David was interested in the angry tirade. Because this girl had money, he asked what he suggested. Somewhere, she answered. At first, she wanted to find feeding for her pet. She released the soul of the falcon and promised to forgive everything if David lasts for 3 minutes. The warrior mag took such a case as meanness, but the guy had nothing left. All but Bruce, they were convinced that David was ended. Soul coped with the secret kingdom. Meanwhile, the guy tested the speed and power of the falcon. He realized that it would not be easy. In the end, David realized that he was forced to show his power. He had no other options. Falcon also did not waste time. He attacked the guy again and again. But once again, going to the Vera, the bird finally received a decent answer. Stuffed by the enemy, David asked if he had passed for 3 minutes. Daisy noted the courage of a stranger, and he dared to kill her spirit. The guy replied that she told herself to stay for 3 minutes, but no one was forbidden. These words had the opposite effect. Daisy's energy filled almost the whole horizon. But Bruce stopped her, saying that David is a respectable man in the temple and a member of the Black Gold League. The girl noted that the guy probably also encroaches on the task of 5 stars, which was interested in the opponent. It was not easy for the fourth transformation, needed the help of the Celestial Pavilion, and he was one. David was tired of waiting for adequacy, and he decided to say goodbye. The angry Daisy saddled her horse Spirit in order to return to the capital. The guy looked at her in the trail and thought whether the girl could cope with the dragon. But now this question was not in time. The main purpose of David was the murder of the dragon of the earth. The guy decided to go to the mountain ridge. The system reported that the dragon was still alive. But not only David wanted this boss in the collection, Daisy also arrived at the same location. Despite the low level, the dragon of the earth is very rare. The girls' team needs a lot of strength. But the plans of the young lady were not destined to come true. The guard reported that some came here earlier. The angry Daisy silently looked at Bert, and he nervously swallowed saliva. He tried to click on the guard, but nothing happened. He had his duties. The girl did not want to hear anything. She decided to even remove the staff. The massacre prevented David with his own person. The angry Daisy turned to him, radiating a sinister aura. Bert, preventing the actions of an angry young lady, first ran to the annoying guy with claims. David suspected that in this group there were some secret plans for him, but Daisy hurried to debunk the idea. The guy asked what exactly brought a young lady in the low-level outskirts of the wild boss. Bruce answered her, explaining that they were preparing to conquer the wing of the Black Flame, which is a practice. But David was not going to share her plans with others, although the girl tried to provoke. Saying goodbye to the brazen, the guy entered the teleport. Everyone was focused on David's arrogant behavior, and Bruce was amazed that he was in such locations. The warrior mint thought that Daisy was going to conquer the black dragon. She had every chance of it. In front of him, the guy saw the earthly dragon that was more like a lizard. This sleeping boss had 61st level. David could not use the wolf spirit and demonic blade. Weapons of starlight levels are enough. The blow of the soul label awakened the dragon of the earth from a deep sleep. The protection of this FM Shura was at a high level. Someone, and the dragons were able to do such a technique. David decided to act quickly and struck a blow in search of a vulnerable place. In the end, the guy was lucky to find a place without mineral protection. This blow has taken away 50% of the boss. The Earth's dragon of the rocky abyss, after such harm, became a state of rage, which the system was informed. He grouped into a wheel, which at a huge speed began to roll towards his opponent. David did not joke such activity. The guy had to flee. But wherever he ran, at the same moment the dragon wheel was brought to him. David constantly had to flee, and because of this, there was no chance to attack the enemy. Suddenly, the guy saw a plot of granite wall. It was an obvious clue. After a few seconds, the Dragon Ball at high speed crashed into a solid rock. The yellow giant was severely stunned by this blow and began to shake. David decided not to give the opponent a chance to recover. Bruce and Bert did not understand what they were waiting here, but did not dare to ask about it. but Daisy insisted that this brazen was capable of seeing. The system announced that David on his own struck the Earth's dragon. This caused a great excitement among the group that watched the result. The teleport opened and everyone kept breathing, expecting a brave man. David came out in the armor of the Earth's dragon and asked that all these people were still doing here. After a second's silence, all except Daisy were laughing. David was late that his backpack was full of things, so I had to wear these armor on himself. Instantly calming down, the guy asked if one of the attendees had a record. Daisy finally acknowledged that the guy's capable, but still tried to put herself on the step above. David did not remain silent. He replied that he would conquer the black dragon much earlier than her. It was a great, indignant lady. But the guy did not star and said that his name is David, and he was a conqueror of the black dragon. Suddenly, the system announced the opening of a secret mission through victory over the Earth's dragon. The boy was called to underground prison in Sleeping Mountains, to which no one dared to approach. The monsters there were higher levels, and the props for the mission were specifically confirmed. It was a rusty key and vitality and blood of the Earth's abyss. The guy was so conceived in future plans that he lost interest in Daisy. He went away without looking at a girl who, even, did not find something to be shouted in response. Therefore, the young lady broke her anger on Bruce and Bertha, ordered not to take her eyes from David. Finally, the guy's transformation was completed. Time was to think about the next plan of action. The set of platinum levels of the Earth's dragon was really good in price and quality, though a little ugly. In the Sleeping Mountains, many living creatures were buried who went there and no longer returned. David walked a thick fog in which it was difficult to see what was happening around. He decided to look on the map where, in the underground prison, and realized that to go very far. Suddenly, behind his back, the guy heard a crack. Turning around, saw the death of the first monster. When the monster disappeared in the fog, the guy saw the silhouette of the girl who asked whether he was in order. Her name was Grace. The sword master did not understand how David could get to this location, having such a level. The guy thanked for the help and replied that he had come to the mission. The girl offered to join her, but David politely refused. David left the lost Grace and disappeared in the fog, promising to be careful. The guy liked to shake more than actually concede to another. After a safe distance from prying eyes, the guy released monthly wolves. After a few seconds, the wolves became red, activating a high-speed jerk. David was surprised by this transformation. Probably the stone of the souls, also under the influence of the red moon. It took a little time, and here he was standing at one of his wolves at the entrance to the main location. Opening the gate, the guy felt the terrible smell of rotten meat. On the way, the warrior mag saw many dead, and everyone looked as if they died instantly. While knocking out the play that hindered the path, the guy thought that someone killed the whole runny nose. In the main hall stood the one who needed. The boss expected his arrival. It was an obsessed zombie of a dead magician, which had 75 levels and sought once for the glory of blood. When David's wolves began to bite him, the boss screamed in pain. The guy received the next score of experience and notebook of experiments of a crazy magician. David decided to read it. The magician wrote there about his experiments with blood. From this notebook, he understood that this crazy was conducting mass experiments on humans, but unsuccessfully. After familiarization, the system told that David was receiving a reward, a ritual of blessing of blood. This ritual is special. He allowed a person to get power from the blood and restore the glory of his kind. It seemed that it was a constant intensification of bonuses, but this magician died through him. The description was told to use the blood of a mighty creature, and David had the blood of an earthen dragon. Suddenly, the guy had a bold thought connected with the wing of the black flame. David asked in the system whether he could join the dragon when there are no strangers. He answered the affirmative, and he ordered the wolves to stay still so that no one would destroy the magical circle. After a second, the warrior mag had already connected to his avatar. The Elfian sat on the rock and bored while the dragon slept with a good sleep. Lily could not understand that this black dragon was not so. He was just doing something. The girl was stolen for a long time, and only the scoundrel Dwight came to save her. No one was in the case. Lily's thoughts interrupted the black dragon's Rick, which suddenly brought his pause. She started screaming at the fright, but David replied that he did it from the habit. And now he had other things except to argue. With one quick movement, he splashed his chest to the blood. The guy was amazed. The dragon had gold blood, most likely very valuable. Lily asked why he did it, but the guy replied that he accidentally wound himself. The girl began to laugh, saying that in her sleep, he probably rejected the little dragon. The black dragon noted that the princess probably worried about him, which he had fallen in shame. David believed that this amount of blood would be sufficient for the ritual and retain the fluid in the storage. He announced that he would now continue to sleep, warning the girl that the next wave of enemies would soon come. Lily could not understand where he could know all this, but the girl's answers were not destined to wait because the black dragon turned off again. The guy had already returned to the sorcerer and saw that there were no violators in his absence. According to the mission, the ritual needed to be in the center of the magical circle. The guy should drink the blood of the black dragon, but the result may be unpredictable. Taking a second for reflection, David strongly bent the flask and filled her contents in his mouth. After a moment, the warrior twig twisted on the floor with horrible pain. He was very hot, as if the whole body melted inside. Blood began to entangle it from all sides, trying to absorb completely. The lunar wolves began to show fangs, having the desire to rush to the owner. But from the last forces, David had time to shout to them so that they would not approach. The guy was convinced that he would be able to pass this horrible exam and get what he wanted. It took a few minutes, and the cocoon weaving from the blood was completed, as the system announced. The lunar wolves came closer to sniff their master. Suddenly, the predators scared the transformation. Powerful rays of energy made their way through the shell. The ritual of the blessing of blood was completed. It was a rebirth on a 5-level, strong fighter. David radiated his being an indomitable flame, which embodied all the power of the black dragon. This force inspired the fear of other creatures who had to conquer strong. The guy decided to try new opportunities and click in his fingers, forming a large flow of energy. Even he was surprised and terrified of his strength. David and the wolves had to flee. In the last second, they managed to run outside, escaping from the explosion. The secret of the blessing of blood has gone into the past. The guy needs to learn to better control power. David decided to change his profession, but unexpectedly, his plans broke a cry for help. The voice he heard was familiar to him. The same girl, a sword master, was in trouble. Grace was in danger. She tried to protect herself from strangers. The 4 scoundrels at least 90 levels surrounded it and behaved very disgusting. The girl threatened them with a punishment from the guild change of the profession because what they did was illegal, but they have long been on the black guild list and wandered wild. The girl decided that she was better to die than to endure such humiliation. Suddenly, the hand of one of the attackers who reached the grace was cut in half. David said that he had long heard of a local gang of robbers that attacks single players. The scoundrels immediately entered the fight, promising the guy a quick end. Grace, seeing that the attention of her switched to the boy, shouted to escape. Earlier, David would use the legendary artifact for such a struggle, but now everything was different. With one powerful blow, he threw 3 opponents into the air. But they were not going to give up so quickly. One of them attacked the guy from the back. David became not only stronger, but also faster. With one blow, he broke the sword of the attacker in half. The robber was shocked. The stranger's dagger was found to be the level of starlight. He covered his associate that this boy was much better for a girl. Those immediately rushed to survive the stolen. David applied the dragon's energy against the attackers. He did not want to be merciful to them. The black flame of destruction killed the rags in a few seconds. From this clash, the guy got a complete little thing. These freaks were worth death. As expected, the new power of the boy had a very powerful energy of destruction. David asked whether Grace was in order, but she could only talk about his strength. The girl could not think that this stranger was so strong. She was wrong earlier. Grace asked how the boy's name is, and he finally introduced to her. She was amazed. This name was familiar to everyone, which even did not know David. It turns out that Claire and Chloe have already managed to tell everyone, even the smallest little things about him. Everyone who was in the restaurant on the day of the Phantom Cloud Guild was known to David. The guy became so embarrassed that he decided to hurry up with goodbye. But Grace, even in these few minutes of conversation, has already fallen in love with him. David returned to the statue to the temple to change his profession. After checking, the system awarded him the legendary level of the secret magician. Before the heap, he got the skill of the real mag of magicians, who destroyed all the spells. Another skill was magic armor that had a good protective effect and exacerbated attacks. The Book of Skills, which also included, had a double improvement effect. Now the guy could easily defeat the Earth's dragon Rocky Abyss. The abbot of the temple greeted David with such good progress, but she looked unhappy. The girl said that now to change his profession, it will be necessary to go to the city of heaven. She was upset that she would not see him anymore. But suddenly the statue shined with bright light. This light shrouded it, forming a cocoon. It resembled the effect of a blessing ritual. In the end, the blessing ritual was completed, and the abbot became the priest of the Temple of Five Transformations. The girl was satisfied with the result. Now they can continue to see the boy. After leaning to David, she said that she would relax with her. The guy was not mind. He suggested going to the city of heaven together. Meanwhile, a crowd of those who wanted to enter was formed near the gate of the temple. They were dissatisfied. Finally, the door opened and people saw David, who was holding a rector. No one understood why the girl is unconscious and what these two did half an hour. The guy's annoying to listen to nonsense, so he just asked everyone to go out. But the bold giant, unexpectedly, put his hand on his shoulder and began to demand explanations. David looked around and looked at the brazen with rage, radiating horrifying energy. From the surprise, the giant fell to the ground. The boy's gaze almost made him filling his pants. The guide girl, who appeared from nowhere, reported that she is now a new priestess of the temple in the eastern city. She said with sadness that they with a boyfriend and a rector, more likely than everything, would not see soon. But the guy promised to return and drink tea together. The girl with tears in her eyes said goodbye to them. Soon the new priest and David arrived in the city of heaven, namely to the temple of changing the profession. They were met by a respectable man and promised to take care of a new priestess, Vanessa. Now their stronghold is here. You need to buy housing and resolve the issue with grandparents. The guy sent a letter to his native letter and some money. He promised that he would often come home. The next step was the search for the house. For this, the guy used the services of the realtor. He was offered an individual service for a fee and the lack of worries. This option was interested in David, and he immediately agreed to sign the documents. So the lacquer of life began. Finally, the guy could relax and eat delicious. David decided to get sick well and visit Vanessa tomorrow. The girl finally woke up, not understanding where she is. Next to it was a priest who brought Vanessa herbal broth to recover. The man said the statue did not give prophecies and asked what the girl was thinking about David. Vanessa replied that he is a hero who always makes miracles and has a good and stable heart. The priest noted that the red moon has not been dissipated for many days, and the same event is close. Vanessa began to reproach herself because she forgot about it. The girl hurried to David to warn him of the invasion of the red moon. The new priestess of the city of heaven was worried that nothing happened to the guy. David saw the 10th dream, but unexpectedly, he was awakened by the cry of horror. One of the housewives lay on the ground and showed the guy a finger where she saw the monster. The invasion of the red moon began with the appearance of a boss of a clan of demons with giant hands. The monster threatened David, but he promised to finish her quickly and go to take a nap. The dialogue of two opponents was interrupted by Daisy, which appeared with the words that the guy, this time, the target. The girl shouted David to go away. This time the invasion of the red moon is curbing. The guy did not understand what was happening, but Daisy was not going to answer the questions. The young lady released the delete spirit of the tiger. The monster and the beast joined the fierce battle, breaking into the paths all in their way. David was very dissatisfied with these circumstances. He was not arranged by a mess. At the peak of the fight to David joined Vanessa. The guy was surprised by her appearance. She explained that as she woke up, she remembered that she did not tell him about the invasion of the red moon. The monsters from the purple decline space are bursting to where they find the hero for the purpose of murder. Those who will be killed by crimson decline will not be resurrected. This happens after the third transformation. David thought that this event is too strong for the third transformation. Maybe Daisy wants to get a crystal of the red moon. Probably the purple decline had some features. The monsters of the level of the third transformation have suddenly increased to the fifth. The level of strength was dynamically changing. Meanwhile, 3 perfumes of animals have already opposed the lawn against the demon. He made a striking blow. Daisy did not understand where in the purple decline of the third level of transformation such power. David noted if so, the girl would destroy his home and offered her intervention. He asked the girl to sit and look at how he could handle. With one wave, the blade David broke the dark energy around him. After a moment, he made all this flow against the boss demon. Not letting go to recover, the guy applied a ghost body against him. To overcome, hit the demon of death, reducing his health to 40%. Daisy couldn't believe her eyes. The guy knocked 60% of health with one blow. As David thought, the strength of this monster changed depending on the current goal. And now that the boy had a double improvement, he could overcome him, relying on power. The warrior mag approached the giant and made one short and quick blow to the body. The demon fell to the ground, destroying his body architecture. After a few seconds, the monster, frantic from the rage, rushed to David. David did not frighten such activity of the enemy. He was ready for everything. Having generated all his power in one blow, David sent him against the boss. The monster collapsed into parts. The invasion of the Red Moon was not something special. Vanessa was delighted. The guy skillfully coped with a criminal decline. Daisy did not like the powerful force that hid under the human boy's human face. She decided to leave, finally saying that next time the guy would get a whistle from her. David showed Vanessa Crystal of the Red Moon and asked what his uniqueness. But she did not have time to answer. Unexpectedly, a purple portal opened above them. Under pressure from his strength, the guy could not control his body. The last thing David saw was Vanessa's face. In the morning, the guy woke up with horror. He saw a half-boring priestess in front of him. The girl felt as he moved and woke up. She tried to reassure David, explaining that yesterday had to carry out a ritual for him. It was necessary to deprive the hero of infection with purple force after collision with purple decline. Such a procedure required the close contact of two people. In addition, David lost consciousness. Both the guy and the girl at this moment felt very strong. Suddenly, Vanessa coughed that the warrior was very concerned, but the girl reassured him. The body of the priests of the temple is able to clean itself from infection with purple force. David still insisted that she did not need to risk himself so much because of him. The priestess explained that, starting with the third transformation, the heroes become a VIP member of the temple and have privileges. The large monthly payment, discounts for the purchase of goods, the temple was very generous when the level increased. The most important was access to the exchange rate of the crystalline cell of the Red Moon. It is an exchange point where the centers of the Red Moon are exchanged for valuable objects, equipment, and spell. David immediately wanted to see what things you could exchange things that Daisy wanted to get. He was available first and second order spells and various artifacts that could not be obtained. The objects cost at least 300 crystalline cells, and it had 3. It is necessary to increase strength. Vanessa reported that she should go back to the temple, and the boy had many things. Finally, the girl warned that an important person will come to the heavenly city today. Sometime after this conversation, the teleport opened in the City of Dragons. Hazel, a master of animals 128 level, decided to visit here. The guards who were behind were discussing that this time, the lady should conquer a giant dragon. The delegation, with all reverence, was greeted by the Consul of External Connections, named Douglas. He noted that Hazel was risked by everyone for the sake of the Black Dragon, but her people were confident in victory. Soon the young lady came to get acquainted with the consul. The girl turned out to be very polite and naive, not at all like her father, whom Douglas knew. The consul sent the girl to the teleportation point, explaining the road. The accompanied people were dissatisfied with trying to ask them, although they just came. But Hazel was not mind. She was glad to conquer the city's owners. Daisy watched from afar. She was interested in a talented rival. But this little girl was not as big as David. Bruce reported that he recently received the rank of warrior, and in a short time he increased his skills without support. Daisy was really afraid of a boy with a lower rank than she had always done unexpected actions. Since Hazel was already going to go, Daisy also decided that time to prepare for tomorrow's trip. Suddenly, near the very portal, the competitor looked around and waved the girl greeting. Bruce was amazed with such ease despite the use of hidden items. It changed the plans of Daisy. She ordered to gather all people immediately near the fortress of the Black Dragon. David at this time tried to force housewives to remove the night clutter and repair broken walls. Suddenly, the whole process interrupted the connection system notification. David hastened to go to the teleport, ordering all those present to take care of the house. After a moment, he already got into his avatar and learned about the invasion of 24 people. It was the same research team as before, under Daisy's leadership. The girl, realizing that they were exposed, ordered them to be attacked, promising to everyone. David was more interested in money for home repair and compensation for being interfered with. However, this time the research team was better prepared, more experienced fighters and equipment. But the subordinates of the Black Dragon assured their king that there was nothing to worry about. Unknown elite bosses promised, despite nothing, to expel all uninvited guests from the fortress. It turns out that these two last time he licked his blood and therefore successfully mutated, but others were less fortunate. Lily showed the other two mutants who could barely see. David pretended that the Dragon Curve army was ineffective, but these two were really strong. In the end, he ordered 2 mutants to restrain the enemy as much as it would be needed. After this conversation, he paid attention to the dissatisfied face of Lily, who stood nearby. She was thinking about the lack of joy that this time the heroes were very powerful this time. The assault began rapidly. The team moved forward confidently and was ready for possible threats. Bruce was worried about what was happening, despite Daisy's optimism. Suddenly, the group saw two elite monsters, whom the young lady immediately ordered to destroy. Bruce quickly came up with battle tactics and ordered all members of a group of researchers. In the end, the dragons of the mutants used an instant murder with a shadow blow and a frantic blow. When one of them came out of the game, the indicators of the other suddenly increased through the rage. Small monsters came to the aid of elite bosses. The tactics of battle changed again. This time, Daisy released her beast to attack mutants, left other dragons to the group. The researchers believed in their strength. As never before, they were not afraid of anything. After all, the group coped with another elite boss. The two dragons lay one side next to the other without the strength to resist and expected death. Daisy approached them to try to tame at least one. Initially, the mutant resisted. He was not hypnosis. But after all, the girl managed to conquer him. The elite boss forgot who he was. Now his appointment, Daisy is dedicated to serve. The second monster also woke up from a knockdown and tried to send a friend to the path of truth. David, who watched it at a distance, was outraged. He believed that he could not behave. The guy realized that it was time to swallow the meat to pump his level. Lily did not like this idea, especially given the fact that the dragon with her did not share information. But at present, it was the only way to win. David swallowed a piece. The meat was tasted in taste, with a sewage taste, which he reported the elven. Suddenly, the belly of the black dragon plunged into the glow. The pillar of energy, after all, became so powerful that it reached the sky. It was visible from everywhere. Mutanian dragons were also amazed at what was happening. It was absolutely accurately their king. Daisy even had to close her face so that he was not blind. After a few seconds, the transformation was completed. Its rank increased to the level of the radiant moon. Together with his rank, the rank of all dungeons has increased. It was time for active actions. The researchers' team did not understand how it could be raised from the star to the glowing month. Bert went so much that Bruce had to reassure him personally. Daisy led to the point that this is a mistake in the dungeon, because another option was impossible. David decided to study the bold lady and began to accumulate energy. Bruce ordered everyone to open the protective spells and all the skills to reduce the harm to him. The members of the group immediately rushed to execute the guidelines. They realized what threatened negligence. The heroes barely had time to do it as they came to the pure destruction of fiery hell. After that, the black dragon landed to the ground and went in the direction of Bruce. The man was amazed. The boss killed 10 people and left 6 on the verge of death. But they also prepared. Time was to use an emerald circle of life, which returned full health. David evaluated such an artifact. The research team put a bunch of money on equipment this time. Daisy shouted that now the vulnerable places of the black dragon are in sight. Time to attack full power. All as one, the group members went on an attack on the boss, trying to do maximum harm to him. But no matter how they tried, the dragon was adamant. He followed only a girl. Bruce was planning exhaustion this time. They could only pull time. But Bert was not so optimistic. This strategy was designed for the level of Starglow. The members of the group saw that the boss was going to use their skills again. So you need to defend themselves. David applied a dragon strike against the heroes. The research group again suffered losses. Some have already started thinking that they would die in this dungeon. Even Daisy didn't know what to do. The whole detachment was almost lost in one meeting. Bruce rushed to the girl and shouted to let him run away. He explained the affected Daisy that they had no chance of winning. And as a naked lady did not want another end, she realized that he was right. The black dragon saw that the girl was trying to escape, but not this time. The detachment commander, meanwhile, tried to distract the giant, provoking him. David realized that these people were fine to sacrifice themselves for their lady. But another blow to the flame quickly solved the problem they tried to create. Daisy flew on her horse and broke herself for a shameful defeat. However, she was sure that no one was able to conquer this dragon, so she did not lose. Suddenly, the girl's thoughts were interrupted. She did not keep his balance and fell to the ground. Looking back, Daisy saw the silhouette of the boss, so Bruce and others did not last a minute. It was necessary to defend itself, and it was activated by the spirit of the tiger. But David had already grabbed it. Once in the paws of the monster, Daisy began to be pleased to let her go. David was relentless. He wanted to pay a stingless brazen for his dullness. Suddenly, the boy's plans were destroyed by an unrestrained girl's sob. The guy could never think that this girl is so fragile and naive. In the end, the black dragon said that he would not eat it because he understands such a desire for victory. But he could not let go so much, so she gave her a quick death from the flames. When the dragon level increased, David decided that he had nothing to blame. This time, the black dragon has received the highest amount of experience, several times more than the past. With the reinforcement of dragon blood, this crazy force seemed to break out, and David barely restrained himself. But this experience has increased the level of the seventh. We'll have to fight with stronger opponents. The research group also lost a lot of platinum and diamond levels in this match. David was curious whether he could find something worthwhile among these things. And such a thing really was. An infinite stone. It is the equipment of the level of the radiant moon, which had its own bonuses. The infinity stone removed all restrictions on level, but it was still for everything. The mysterious whirlwind swirled before the muzzle of the black dragon. It turned out to be the rage of the god of the wind, who could break anyone who would dare to challenge. These were treasures from a secret storage. It was time to return. The mission approached. Lily watched how the winged giant flew against the background of the sun, which sat down for the mountains. The dragon won again, and he promised that after that the girl would receive true freedom. A few minutes passed and the guy was teleported to his living room. He was pleasantly impressed by the fact that the work in his absence was not in place. Everything was repaired. After a busy day, the guy wanted his muscles to relax a little and helped him. Meanwhile, a group of researchers discussed their next defeat in this dungeon. Bruce interrupted this noise he could not hear. The team members complained about his destiny. There were no ladies. The heroes fell silent in anticipation. What happened to the girl the same as with her predecessor? But Bruce's alarm broke a rather familiar women's cry. When he looked at the rock that stood nearby, he saw Daisy with his own person. The girl sobbed because of her humiliation. Now she could not be called the brilliant conqueror of animals. After a second, it was amazed in the sharp appearance of a witness of its weakness. The naked lady returned again. She did not want to hear any reports now. Bruce tried to reassure her. He suggested changing the target and tamed other dragons. And Daisy liked this idea. If she has time to tame the other bosses, it would still remain the first. In addition to the black dragon were red and silver. Red was weaker, but both star levels. She praised the assistant for his ingenuity. It turns out that he was quite visionary. Daisy came to the people, announced that all their losses in this dungeon would be compensated. The noise raised interrupted the question as to who they are. Looking around, the young lady saw Himsel, who was surprised at her. Both girls introduced themselves, and the newcomer noticed that she wanted to tame a black dragon. Daisy did not want to spend time on chats, so she walked past and wished good luck. It was very angered by Heisel. She did not understand how to treat people so impolite. The girl's maid realized that he probably did not have a black dragon in his predecessor. But Heisel cut off the girl Daisy and so upset, "You do not need to be abused over another's trouble." In the end, it's time to open this ominous dungeon. But this group also expected an unpleasant surprise, the level of the radiant moon. The team gathered for a meeting. It was necessary to decide what to do. Douglas C. was in touch. He suggested taking the team to the hotel. The elder thought that this has never happened before. A possible cause, someone's intervention. The next day, David returned to the dungeon, where it was extremely quiet. Of course, no one dared to challenge him, because only he was a boss from this den. All the time, David was connected to the black dragon and looked at the fighters who burst into his kingdom. Now finally, his turn to go there as a hero. The first reception of the dungeon looked familiar to the pain. The monsters of the smaller class rushed to defend the king. But the guy even did not stop. This baby did not know who was standing in front of them. Dragons suddenly saw the familiar aura of their king around this stranger. It was incredibly embarrassed, but there were no doubts. It is the black flame of the majestic Lord Athos. The guy ordered them to flee immediately, and the dragons did not dare to contradict him. David called the lunar wolf and ordered him to stay and not allow other monsters to approach. The spirit of the beast, of course, was happy to rush to execute the owner's team. The guy himself decided to act like a boss. Lily finally waited for the dragon. The girl realized that in the dungeon, a new hero. She watched the monster flying into the next battle, and her belief in miracles became less. The black dragon landed before the lunar wolves, who did not expect to see such an opponent. They are well aware that it will not be possible to defeat it on their own, and the owner was not nearby. Suddenly, the dragon punched his chest with his own paw. Boss's health scores immediately decreased to 54%. In fact, there was nothing to fear. David ordered the dragon to stay in place and suppress recovery. Having ordered the dragon to stop other monsters, the guy broke up with him. And at the same moment, he ran to attack the enemy. David realized that in his power, he was due to this giant creature. The boss helped him fulfill the dream. But now it was time to change, and it was necessary to move forward. The guy ordered the black dragon to die and be reborn with a friend. 2 hours later, the boy had almost no strength, not to mention the lunar wolves. But it was too early to stop. Nothing was over. The black dragon still has 19% of health. David decided to strengthen his characteristics by 900% and make the last jerk. Lily all this time was dozing on the rock nearby and woke up from the roaring of her prison pain. The girl forgot about everything in the world and ran to the sound. The monsters around began to dissolve in the air. Suddenly, the Elfian felt the aura of the black dragon completely disappeared. David looked at what happened, widely open eyes. Everything was over. The system reported that the guy struck the boss of the level of the radiant moon and received 1 billion with a hook. In addition to the sea, David received a weapon that was missed by a black dragon. Taking the sword in his hands, the guy felt a tremendous power that almost torn his body. Of course, the warrior immediately wanted to try a new weapon and did one seat. According to the description, this dragon, the descendant of the most ancient exiler, is not surprising that he was so strong. In addition, David accomplished the task of destroying the dragon and unlocking the dragon's heart. After another change in his characteristics, he became a boss in the human likeness. A moment later, the Black Flame's boss became close to it, and the taper will fight next to it. At this point, David wanted more than the dragon did not blame him for his defeat. But there was no time for reflection. It was necessary to go on the road to the top of the fortress. The former boss of the dungeon humbly flew into the air. Meanwhile, Lily tried to analyze what was happening. The dragon's associates disappeared, but her reflection was interrupted by the appearance of a familiar silhouette in the sky. The dragon did not behave in the usual way and therefore greatly scared the girl. Suddenly, the Elfian saw on his back a stranger who said that he had come to save her. Lily could not believe her eyes. Someone could conquer a black dragon. As it became possible at all, these creatures are the strongest among their species and despise everyone else. The conquest of the monster has rotated the whole story so far. This guy is a real dragon fighter. But there was no time for reflection, because this stranger with a smile invited to get out of the dungeon. The girl climbed into the giant and grabbed the rider. The black dragon flew into the sky. Lily closed her eyes, but David assured that there was nothing to fear. They flew incredible landscapes. The sharp peaks of the mountains looked through the club clouds. The girl felt the ease of being, as if she had released from the shackles, as she reported. The dragon, when he heard these words, replied that soon the princess would actually become free. The girl understood these words incorrectly, as if the black giant was not easy all this time. But the guy did not correct her impression of what was happening. They flew to the teleport. The teleport led to the wasteland, where the next battle was happening right now. The group of heroes tried to overcome monsters who did not just want to give up. But all the resistance stopped when the giant shadow of the black dragon closed the sun. The giant landed sharply to the ground and issued an angry roar, which he was frightened by people. David looked with a smile as they flee in different directions due to the appearance of the boss. The guy explained the elves that he could send her to the residence of the city authorities, but did not want to. It turns out Lily swore that she would marry the one who would save her from captivity. In the end, David realized that he would not be able to disassemble from the former captive. But it pulled a lot of questions that he could not answer. The elven was interesting. A few minutes passed and the dragon's voice was heard in the outside world, but it was impossible. Hazel, like Daisy, listened to a sound that gradually approached the city. It was very interesting for the girl to see what was happening, not to stay waiting for news. The spy, who watched her, also wished that Hazel would go to the meeting with the mayor of the city. David and Lily did not even know what they were being prepared, some reception. Soon the guy was considering that they finally flew to the outskirts of the city. They were already waiting for the mayor of heaven with a delegation. They were worried about the appearance of a world boss. There was no limit to their surprise when they saw with their own eyes a black dragon that got out. Suddenly, David descended from the giant's back and greeted the audience politely. The Benjamin manager was present in the delegation and reported that he had already met with the guy before. The mayor asked whether the hero of this black dragon was tamed, and he answered in the affirmative. But Clyde was not inclined to believe in words to strangers. He considered it impossible. David, by waving his hand, forced the dragon of the large and asked if such evidence would be enough. The new stress for the mayor was the emergence of the Easter princess of the country of elves from the dungeon. Clyde finally became convinced of the powerful skills of the boy, although he was very young for such strength. David could be the divine knight of the seventh transformation of the burning sun. Fun the true power of the guy, Clyde suddenly fell on his knees, bowing to him. A strange picture was formed near the main gate of the city, which was accompanied by a bell silence. David could not stand the first and hurried to lift the mayor of the city of heaven from the knees. As soon as the ceremonies were over, the system announced the election of a new boss for the next stage. Clyde wondered whether the guy was the head of the Global Association of Conquerors of Animals. Benjamina put this question in a dead end, because there were no official records. Suddenly, a respectful conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Heisel, who wanted to meet the alien. She immediately went to business and asked about his experience of conquering giant dragons. But in a timely manner, although David did not know how to answer the questions that did not end. After a few seconds, the guy said that he was not a conqueror of animals. This remark caused the explosion of new questions, which was further scared by the warrior. In the end, David said he had his secrets and he wanted to fly to the city on a dragon. Clyde agreed to warn the inhabitants so that he did not panic. He liked the newly arrived manners. Hazel, in turn, asked whether you could share this news with your teacher. David was explained that the girl was a member of the Global Association of Conquerors of Animals. Her teacher was one of the 9 majestic association leaders. The warrior could potentially become their member. The guy knew that the conquerors of the beast were on the 8th and 9th levels. This news struck him, but did not wait. He said goodbye to those present and flew into the sky. The entire delegation was fascinated by the trace of David, having the desire to have her own dragon. Ados is low over the city and at some point flashed over Daisy. The girl with anger saw that a boy was sitting on his back. She was unpleasant to think that she was weaker than him and had less practice. Through tears, the young lady promised that she would become stronger, curb the dragon, and overcome David. The further a dragon flew into the city, the more residents were surprised by its size. The locals looked at the conqueror and the girl sitting next to him. It took a few minutes and Ados, along with the raids, finally landed near David's estate. The guy immediately apologized to the housewife for having time to scare her with his arrival. He did not want to sway with a dragon, but there was no room for its maintenance yet. Lily was fascinated by the residence of her rescuer. It was spacious and clean. David left the girl on the staff, and he hurried to start solving his issues. In fact, he was worried that the princess would be difficult to please, but it turned out to be sweet and simple. Left alone, the guy asked the system to introduce him to the new boss. She announced that the new boss was the owner of the primordial sin of the divine level. The guy did not even know what that means. All known high transformations were called the legendary stage. Through the test of God, you can get the title of semi-god and then reach the divine level. David was curious to what stage he could grow with this boss. In a moment, the guy confirmed the connection and plunged into the portal. The boss was an omniscient immortal lord and had a horrifying look and power. To destroy it, it is necessary to destroy all demons into the abyss. Probably it was a divine level. The guy asked the system to tell more information about the location. The abyss of the demons is a giant astral crack of high complexity associated with the human world. Only the guild of the SSS level could now face the divine level boss. The guy finally realized that he received an immortal avatar in his essence. The owner of sin managed the 7 kings, whose throne David saw in the hall in front of him. The 4 thrones glowed, and 3 no. Apparently these bosses have already won earlier. David decided to test his new talent and activate the resurrection of subordinates. He confused with his energy the first of the inactive thrones. A few seconds, the ruler saw the resurrection of his subordinate, the boss of gluttony. The demon mutant immediately began to thank him for mercy. This monster had just the level of the burning sun. David thought that he had resurrected some failure. But the skill of absorption of enemies and the donation of tribute to the Lord could help in raising the level. David heard a sound that was very similar to a knock on the door. He ordered Velseville to return to his post and expect orders. He added that the lust and the desire also died and vowed to make the heroes pay for everything. The system reported that the demon returned to the 100th level. It was indeed the worst of the 7 kings. The guy decided that today getting to know the new avatar would be enough. From such absolute power, David felt complete control over everything. It was addictive. From the thought of the warrior brought the knock on the door. It was a maid. She reported that the boy came with a visit to Clyde and insisted on the meeting. When David descended into the living room, the mayor looked forward towards him. He reported that the news of the conquest of the dragon by the guy dispersed throughout the country, even the world. Many began to doubt this because they did not see their own eyes, so the association member wants to meet. David asked when to expect him, and the mayor replied that in the next 10 minutes. Daisy, meanwhile, was in the center of teleportation of the city of heaven. There was a huge crowd of people around. The girl realized that such a hype was caused by the fact that someone has arrived. And her suspicions were faithful. The head of the Global Association of Conquerors of Animals, Derek, arrived in the city. The middle-aged man politely greeted others. Was a great luck to see him personally. Daisy greeted, and Derek asked if she came here also through the Black Dragon. She replied that her abilities were not enough for conquest, and the title no longer belongs to her. The head of the Conquerors of the Animals said that the main thing is not to get hung up on the titles. Daisy dreamed of getting to the kingdom of the dragon spirit and could only get there David because he had one. Many of the best conquerors of animals tried to tame giant dragons. There were no exceptions. The stronger the dragon, the more likely it is to get strong blessings and valuable awards. Therefore, the sanctuary soon opened. The girl wanted to try to conquer the silver dragon. Derek suggested that him make a company and may have some secrets from David. But the girl was not pleased with this proposal, and she was in a hurry to say goodbye. Clyde and David have been waiting for a distinguished guest for a few minutes. And finally, a flame phoenix appeared near the boy's estate, on whose back he sat Derek. Atos, feeling the appearance of a competitor, immediately opened his eyes and began to growl at the newcomers. From such a meeting, Phoenix began to frighten the air without deciding to approach. In the end, the conqueror of the beast managed to successfully calm his ward and land. Clyde greeted and presented David's elders. Derek noted that the guy was young and already received such power and therefore very talented. He announced that the association invites David to join the Global Association of Overnamers. Such news knocked out the guy out of the track. He replied that he should not join them. And the remark that he did not conquer animals this time already knocked out the earth from under the feet of the elder. For Derek to believe him, David showed his profession, which was stated that he was a magician. The elder asked for a moment for reflection. His colleagues expected good negotiation results and broke the chat with their messages. They even approved the award of David the title of honorary participant. Derek told the guy this news, and the warrior wondered that they wanted in return. In fact, the association's heads were interested in obtaining several lessons in conquering a giant dragon. The proposal scared David, but the SSS class privileges were, at the same time, very attractive. The association was important for the guy to simply try to explain his experience. Under such conditions, David, of course, agreed. When the games became a reality, a temple of change of professions was founded in the sacred city. He was led by the high priest, who never left the city. His power and status were unknown. Little was known that this high priest was a girl named Marilyn. She was seen once. The strongest magician in the world, which completed the trial of God, tried to challenge her. He was called Elliot. He tried to attack the girl with numerous devastating attacks. The result of such tactics was almost complete extermination of the sacred city. But even the protective light shield of Marilyn could not punch. No one was challenging her. And so, when the priestess passed 10 years, she suddenly received a message that Velzevul was risen again. The bosses of the level of Starlight and above were not revived this rule, and therefore a new mechanism has emerged. The third sacred magnificent priestess, Naomi, visited Verkhovna. Marilyn used the Eye of Permeability. She saw that around the girl the abyss of demons who was in the darkness. Suddenly, the supreme priestess saw in front of her the thrones of 7 kings of priestly sins. One king appeared at every 100 levels, and gluttony was revived with 3 dead. Around one of the thrones, Marilyn saw the same magical power. The Eye of Insight could not grasp it. The girl called all her power to force this power to show her true form. Only God's light helped to see the outline of man in the center of this darkness. But unexpectedly, one of the demons stopped the girl's efforts in defense of his ruler. It was a boss of pride, a demon of divine level. The demon used the magical barrier of the kingdom against Marilyn. The priest barely had time to turn off the Eye of Insight. Pride was dissatisfied with the fact that the rival fled so quickly from the duel. She immediately hurried to report the Lord about the spy in the kingdom. Demons were caught to see the outlines of his Lord's face again. In the meantime, Marilyn barely translated his spirit. She underestimated the strength of the abyss of demons. The girl was worried about the one who was served even by the king of the firstborn sin of the divine level. Reflections of the priest of the Temple of Change of Professions were interrupted by the world's advocacy of the system. The report said that the owner of primordial sin appeared in the abyss of demons. The system promised a unique limited divine weapon for the murder of a boss of firstborn sin. It was necessary for the murder of the owner of primordial sin. The murder of the world boss will open a new application, climbing to the deity. This news has raised a large wave of discussions. None of the characters had heard about it before. Even David was amazed he suddenly became a world boss. Derek decided to say goodbye to the guy because they had already resolved the main questions. Vanessa, who appeared nearby, reported that there are anomalous events and have bad anticipation. But David was in a hurry to reassure the girl, assuring that she was cautious. He understood that serious confrontation was waiting for him in the near future. It was necessary to prepare. The guy decided to get the necessary weapons to kill the owner of the firstborn sin. David was interested whether it was possible if the owner himself kills bosses of primordial sin. The weapon in question had unique limited divine labels and unrealistic power. His subordinates could be sacrificed. In addition, the use of force can resurrect them. If David killed the ruler of primordial sin on his own, he would have become the first to gain divinity. Other heroes would not be done, but it was time to take the next 5-star mission of the fourth transformation. While the guy was engaged in his affairs, there was only talk in the sacred city that about the ad. The same magician Elliot met on the main square of his longtime familiar competitors in Thai dialogue. Kendall, the head of the Global Association of Conquerors of Animals, was surprised by the appearance of the old man. And Floyd, the head of the Guild of the Eternal Battle of Field, noted that this ad is of great importance. The head of the Guild of Temple Knights, Gary, added that the challenge of the priestess reported the seriousness of the situation. In the temple, the change of professions was crowded. Everyone was courting to test their capabilities. But the appearance of the legendary heroes forced everyone present to speak only about them. Previously, these people could only be seen on TV. A grand show was approaching. The Supreme Priestess thanked the audience for responding to the call. She explained the situation and added that only by killing bosses of primordial sins, you could kill the ruler. To increase the chance of getting a weapon, the boss must kill a high-level specialist, one of those present. The current record was the passage of 386 levels, and remained another 314 to the last of the bosses. She asked Elliot as much as you could move into the abyss, raising her level by 1. After a glass, he replied that 1 point would help to pass about 3 equal. He would not withstand. Floyd noted that the deeper it is to immerse in the abyss, the greater the difference in the strength between the levels. Marilyn realized that he needed to pump his levels for 100 to move to 700. If the boss of primordial sin could be resurrected several times, they would reduce the time of increasing levels. The main question was the distribution of weapons between the winners. No one wanted to concede. Only the head of the knights noted that all present were stuck in half-gods, and it is important to overcome this obstacle. At the same time, they did not have 7 specialists with 9th transformation. Someone had to become a dome. But the Reborn Temple will also join an expedition, and a result will be formed. The head of the knights asked Marilyn for an apology for saying unnecessary. Floyd proposed to unite every country and create his own team of heroes and fight in turn. There was no unanimity in this matter. Someone supported the project and someone was not. Weaker monsters were a problem that should be solved at the expense of personal guild forces. After listening to all the thoughts on this, Marilyn called on the heads of guild to vote. In the end, 80% voted for the proposal. The participating countries will be random. After this question, the priestess turned to the Kendall, who had to share her information. She reported that in the kingdom of the dragon spirit, they can significantly increase their experience and level. But the only one who could enter there was a guy who conquered himself a black dragon that noted Elliot. The woman agreed with the remarks, but added that he was now a respectable member of their association. The head of the knights did not understand why the guy could not make a full member. Kendall replied that it was a miracle at all, because David was not a conqueror of animals, but a magnitude. There were no limits to the audience. No one was answered. Elliot was the first to leave the shock. He considered it impossible because he also tried to conquer the dragons. Kendall considered his remarks envy, which caused the indignation of an honorary magician. There was a great dispute between the woman and the old man, which the head of the knights tried to stop. But no matter how cool such news was from the area of fiction, Such dragons are more likely to die than they seem. Marilyn reasoned whether this young warrior could do what they were not able to do. Kendall reported that David can be verified because of their list of members of the association. What the Supreme Priestess did, the guy appeared, only the third transformation. The announcement of this information has caused a new wave of misunderstanding among the heads of guilds. Floyd did not understand why none of them received information about David. Kendall added that they planned to invite the guy for a lecture to the association to exchange experience. The woman believed that so far they were just wrong, tried to conquer the dragons. The news that anyone can conquer the dragon. If this is true, then the secret kingdom of the dragon spirit will no longer be a specialization of conquerors of animals. Elliot did not want to discuss more. He wanted to find this gifted young man the most. The trick wanted to exchange the dragon on one of the forbidden ones, promising not to leave David in the circulation. Meanwhile, the guy did not even know the serious battles at his expense. He became ill. The next mission was the one on which Daisy stuck and had a diamond level of complexity. But for David, it was not an obstacle. The guy decided to accomplish the task. Vanessa looked with a smile as the black dragon was flying into the sky. She wanted the success of a majestic warrior. The location was the icy city. The cold ate the passion of the heroes. The victory could not be simple for them. Suddenly, a giant dragon landed just before the Trinity of the Brave. David sincerely apologized for such an act, but added that his turn of subjugation of the dungeon has now come. The brave people are not strongly denied. They looked more at the stranger because they have already heard about him. The warrior mag was looking at the location. It was really very cold. He was already in a hurry to meet the first monsters. For Ados, it was a complete trifle. He just tried to devour the attackers. The same, seeing such a giant monster in front of them, began to be pleased with the mercy. The guy decided not to spend time on them, but just to find a boss immediately and defeat him. Everything that came to David for a quick result is the destruction of the icy city. And really, the boss appeared immediately. It was a witch, and it was evil. The dark witch did not even have time to complete the sentence. The black dragon crushed it with a paw. The system announced David of the successful completion of the task, which was even easier than he thought. A queue has already begun to form near the portal to the icy city. The Trinity of Brave Men told the girls that there is a hero who will pass the quest inside. They explained that this is the same guy who conquered the dragon, and they only have to wait. The girls, or rather Claire and Chloe, also decided to look at a prominent person. They hoped that one of them would like the guy and already made plans. One of the brave men said that in order to look at the hero, 2 more men came. Elliot and Floyd were these willing ones who did not want to attract attention at all. And so the moment came when the black dragon, along with David, came out of teleport. Claire was in a state of effect from the appearance of a winged giant. She was expecting to see a good conqueror, but to the surprise of the girl, he looked at her from the back of the dragon in response to David. At all, they did not understand what was happening. It was not a mistake. The guy, meanwhile, carefully approached the Femininity Center and greeted. Adeline asked him whether he really conquered the dragon, and he answered in the affirmative. The girls reported that they have come to increase their level, but now they have to wait. Seeking opportunities for them, David stretched Chloe artifact, which he received from the boss. The girl began to give up the gift, but David insisted that he did not need this thing. Claire joined persuasives, and after all, Chloe did not resist. David insisted that girls should not be ashamed because they were friends who fought together. The black dragon behind the boy's back suddenly began to behave strangely, and David looked around. The violent rest was Elliot, who said he just touched the beast. But the guy was amazed. A stranger could touch Atos and remain unharmed. David asked who the man was. Despite the strong smell of alcohol, the girls saw something familiar. Elliot replied that he did not hurt anyone and assured that there was no reason to worry. Suddenly, the stranger was gone. He quickly moved in space, unnoticed for the guy. David finally saw Elliot and Floyd again and asked their names with respect. Those loved were introduced and named their guilds. The guy was amazed. These 2 were the leaders of the Guild SSS from the class, the strongest in the world. The warrior mag asked if they came to talk with him about the experience of the dragon teamet. This question forced Elliot to release some of his energy. Even it was difficult for the guy to breathe. Floyd stopped the sorcerer in time because he saw that he was scaring the youth with his magic. He reported that Kendall told them what had happened and assured that the guy was in complete safe. Elliot, in turn, suggested in exchange for the experience of David Shora's Forbidden. It was a seductive proposal, given that the guy had just 2. But if some of the best specialists in the world know the truth, he will be overflowing. David replied that scrolls are good, but he would like a book of prohibited skills. Elliot wondered why the guy needs this book. Can he use forbidden magic? But Floyd did not see anything strange because the guy had two ways of self-improvement, a magician and a warrior. Elliot agreed to the exchange, but warned that to use the book it is necessary to become stronger. David was delighted. He will finally be able to destroy the sixth transformation. It is a real treasure. The guy warned that the experience of conquering dragons does not necessarily lead to success. The magician should understand. In order to avoid listening to other players, the sorcerer suggested that sound insulation. After a few seconds, a golden dome was formed on the ice wasteland. A few minutes later, the interested persons learned the secret that the guy invented on the go. Elliot immediately went in search of a giant dragon. Floyd had doubts in the beginning, but the guy really knew the dungeon of the Black Dragon. The chairman of the guild, the Eternal Battlefield, gave David a book of the Switch of the Warrior of the second level of skill. It was a book of corporate skills of the leader of the ninth transformation. The guy became embarrassed. Floyd said that David would soon receive access to the secret kingdom of the dragon spirit. It turns out that the boy expected the battle of dragons and other competitors, except the predecessor. The leader also reported that the guy was entitled to participate in the team to send to the abyss of demons. David became interesting why it is about this abyss. You can train anywhere. The boy's thoughts were true, especially given that he had already survived the invasion of the Red Moon. The Red Month is the most important test for prospective and talented specialists. And the monsters in the abyss of demons are the most similar to the monsters of Purple Declining. David mentioned the store exchange for the crystals of the Red Moon. There could be a special goal. Having said everything he wanted, Floyd said goodbye and flew in his business. Before meeting with these people, David believed that it was enough to conquer a black dragon, but it was not. The guy returned to the statue of the deity to check the passage of the task. He had to become stronger. As a bonus, Davida has the skill of the spirit of Mega Warrior, which rather will help in battle. Vanessa saw that the guy was not happy at all on another increase, but David did not want to share with the girl his thoughts. The guy decided to activate a new avatar and called to the supreme ruler of February, Samael. He gave the demon death and returned it to the abyss. Samael did not understand what he was guilty of the owner who deserved such punishment. David needed his strength. He was more like a king of primordial sin by indicators. Samael's abilities were more creepy than Velseville. He continuously gathered vital forces. In his voice, the guy turned to the boss anger and asked if he doubted him. Of course, the reaction was typical. The demon was ready to execute any order of the owner. The Lord began to feel the ability of the subordinate. In the middle of him began to form anger. He rose from his throne and ordered the boss to return to darkness, promising to resurrect him. Samael thanked the owner and reported that he was ready for the transition. Hearing this, David activated his sword. With one accurate blow, he killed a boss of anger. Black energy escaped from the wound of the demon and flooded the throne hall. The ruler repeated his promise, however, that Samael's death would not last forever. Meanwhile, at the 100th level, the abyss boss of gluttony, Velseville, did his own business. The death of anger was a surprise for him. He suspected that he did the ruler. The system announced David about increasing the experience of murder, but it was catastrophically little. But still, it should be enough to perform the 5th transformation mission. The guy was interested in what artifacts he managed to get due to his tactics. And here he could no longer believe his happiness. They were absolutely unsurpassed things. They increased his current force and life 1,000 times. Now, even without connecting to the boss and without the heart of the dragon, the guy in itself was already a boss. David was even able to tear the wing of the black flame with his bare hands. One of the objects obtained could be used as an artifact forging material. The other was the way to destroy the demons in the abyss, a demonic source. David wondered that maybe there may be someone stronger than the owner of primordial sin. But now the guy's hell was the murder of his avatar. The rest could wait. David was over and decided to see the equipment that had fallen into Samael. It was a semi-spawning artifact, the armor of King Anger, which also had incredible effects. But the guy was disappointed that he did not receive any weapons against sins. It seemed like he gradually stopped smiling luck. David wanted to disconnect, but the system announced the unconfirmed special drops. This special droppo was an artifact of confrontation of sins, angry punishment. It was an incredibly beautiful weapon to kill the owner of priestly sin. And David, he got the key to increasing his indicators. He was delighted. Reflections of a warrior Maga interrupted the appearance of a demon with a report. When the smoke was scattered, he saw that a girl was standing on one knee. She reported that during his sleep she returned to the bottom of the abyss and demanded a punishment for it. David did not understand anything. He was curious to know what happened here when the boss was inactive. In addition, this girl was Queen Gordon, who in combination was masochistic. The guy decided to play the role of the supreme ruler and took a whip. Having said that the bold behavior of the subordinates should be punished, he hit the pride on his back. The girl, in response to his actions, only begged to apply stronger punishment. And who was David to deny her a request? The owner said that he had hit her twice, and the imposition of punishments should be resolved by him. He wondered what kind of news the pride brought from the bottom. The demon replied that yesterday people tried to look to the bottom of the abyss. It was the supreme priest. The guy had no doubt because only this girl could look directly into the depth. The power of the priestess was absolutely incredible. Perhaps it had already reached the divine level. After listening to the report, the supreme ruler ordered Gordon to return to his place. The demon also considered Samael's death exclusively by the gift of the Lord, because people are not yet capable of such. Looking at her master, the girl thought that he was even to death. David returned to reasons for improving his strength. He was waiting for the fifth transformation. Meanwhile, Elliot could not understand why he could not conquer the dragon of the Silver Lake. He has already visited 3 dungeons and almost did not remain in the Federation of Eagles of Living Individuals. Suddenly, the system announced the activation of weapons from the series Confrontation of Sins. The anger of the magician had no limits, he forgot, even about his plans. Someone brazenly violated the rules of the temple. He promised to punish the brazen, whom he would not be, though not everyone could. In the Kingdom of Flowers, a meeting was also convened about the conquest of the dragon. Halzel's father was asked about his daughter's abilities and whether she could repeat David's feat. Graham assured that the daughters promised to help conquer the red dragon in the chances of high. It was also important for the Lord to discuss the issue of participating in the abyss of the abyss. He wanted to make a motivational speech, but a systematic notification of weapons interrupted him. All those present were incredibly interesting. Who was the brave man who challenged the boss of anger? There were not many options in thought. The 9 transformation was in the chosen ones. In the end, the Lord gave an order to go with a delegation to the holy city. Sometime later, the supreme priestess reported that leaders of different countries and guilds under the door of the temple. Maryland did not want to form some new conflicts between countries through this unexpected event. A few minutes later, the Lord of the Flower Kingdom had already demanded the answer about the unlawful acts. They selected the possibility of seizure of these weapons. He demanded that the artifact be selected from the thief. The priestess replied that it was not only a provocation for other countries, but also a challenge for the Temple of Change of Professions. She agreed to give up the persecution if the culprit returned what he took away. But in the temple there was only a silence, which was not involved among the present. Without receiving the confession, the girl announced that in this case, she would perform her duties. After activating her strength, the sacred light will disappear before the liar. It is impossible to escape from the eyes of the statue. But there were those who needed it in the hall. Floyd believed that the culprit had not yet been tested on the temple lie detector. He reasoned only one person, the supreme priestess of Maryland. The priestess agreed with the assumption of the head of the guild and recognized its mistake. She shone with light and herself, but it did not go out. Elliot immediately hurried to apologize for the arrogance, emphasizing that he did not even think of her. But there is a big problem about a person who was able to kill one of the kings of primordial sin. Kendall noted that there are several semi-god fighters among those present, and it could be one of them. But Maryland's spell not only was the culprit, it also found those who are relevant to him. So no one did all the indicators. Even the supreme priestess was lost. In the end, the girl suggested to move on. Now the next boss should be sought at the 200th level. She wondered if the Flower Kingdom would be able to participate in the next trials. The Lord replied that, unfortunately, their strength is insufficient for such low levels. And in this case, according to the draw, the Federation of Eagles will have to replace the Kingdom of Flowers. There were no objections from both pages. Finally, the priestess added that from today the entrances to the abyss will be protected by the army of the Holy City. While everyone else was looking for the perpetrators, David decided to make a new profession. The systemic notification finally received it. The guy was pleased that his name was not stated there. Otherwise, he would be threatened with death. He understood that such an item should be kept secret and not used. David also realized that the transition to a new profession would have to be postponed because it would attract attention. But he couldn't do anything, especially when the work was boiling in his house. He approached one of the maids and asked why and not manually, not in the washing machine. The girl replied that she likes it more and pleases the result. David realized that such a tactic applies to his experience. You just need to find a place for pumping. He realized that the ideal location was the secret kingdom of the dragon spirit. There was a perfect witness there because it was closed, unlike the abyss. The guy decided to turn into a hunter into dragons and to destroy all existing individuals in advance. He ordered Vanessa to find out the information about the current dragon dungeons. She reported that there were red and silver dungeons nearby. The guy chose the last. Vanessa noted that 50 people from Gildaci have been recorded before this. David was not surprised by this news. Knowing this young lady, the conclusion was obvious. The warrior Mag ordered to book a dungeon behind him as a client to squeeze a queue. He was not afraid of revenge on Gildaci. He had enough titles to feel free. In addition, to date, he has accumulated several trumps in the sleeve. If he is not sent to the heroes of the 7th transformation for confrontation, everything will be fine. The guy decided to absorb Samael's particles, but could not decide how it should be done. There was an option to prepare them, according to a few dishes immediately. But the problem was that David could not cook. In the end, he became strongly aware of himself, because it was just raw hearts and liver. After a second, Samael's share was in the guy's mouth, and that released powerful energy. David did not have the strength to restrain himself and shouted in all his voice in pain. The frightened maid broke into the room, but he pretended to have happened. The guy barely moved the spirit when the girl came out. He almost got caught. He was delighted with such force he is not terrible. And if he had come from the wing of the black flame right now, he would be able to destroy it. Such a rapid increase characteristic was quite accurate. He was coordinated as soon as possible to deal with the monsters, but first needed to check Lily. A few seconds, the guy was already knocking on the door of her room, but there was no answer. Therefore, he decided to enter the middle without permission. Looking at everything around, the guy suddenly saw Lily, which was wiped with a towel after a shower. None of them expected this situation, so the reaction was expected, fright and shame. The guy even thought he would hit him when the girl raised her hand up. But when he opened his eyes a few seconds, he saw Lily, who sat on the bed. This behavior forced the hero to turn red. The princess behaved too boldly. Having apologized, David hastened to get out of the room, citing some things. The Elfian laughed. The owner of the house was in fact very shy and innocent. This boy was in no way like any of the elven royal courtyard. Meanwhile, a scandal has been opened in the city of 9 Rivers. Daisy was dissatisfied with someone moving her in line at location. The servant told her that this person was a VIP from the temple, but who was unknown. It made a young lady think that it could be David again. The servant tried to reassure Daisy, offering to wait or to agree with this unknown. But the girl was in such anger that she did not listen to any advice. She ordered him to get away. The girl realized that she would not be able to withstand David and decided to seek help from the teacher. A few seconds, the teacher already asked what happened. Daisy told the whole situation and asked him to solve this problem with the guy. The conversation ended, and what began what a young lady did not like more than everything: the expectation of the result. Sometime later, the teacher in the chat reported that the guy did not agree to her request. The teacher replied to all Daisy's objections that David should not be provoked. It turned out that this young man was also supported by the god of war, Floyd. The guy was really talented. Bruce decided to ask the ladies what a plan of action now, but the girl did not pay attention to him. But she went a few meters, yet she turned and gave him behind. Meanwhile, David had already conquered the secret kingdom of the silver dragon. David saw the difference between this dragon and the wing of the black flame. The silver monster was not going to seem just like that. He fiercely fought for his life. David was pouring a hail of blows. The enemy was not going to make no concessions. Despite all this, the guy ordered the Atos not to interfere. He wanted to try his new weapon. The silver dragon attacked the guy with granite rain, and thousands of rock pieces fell on him. But according to David, the enemy was very slow, though it looked impressive. In addition to everything, he did not receive any harm at all. And the silver dragon was angry more, trying to get a cheeky young man. David grew up so much that such a giant was a small target for him. The guy decided not to wait more and rushed. From the blow, the silver dragon fell to the ground, but the young man did not want to give him time to rest. He flew as close as possible and cut his enemy in half. Due to its properties, the dragon's sword absorbed 10% of the characteristics of the opponent. The weapon itself also began to change, and silver areas appeared on it. The guy was interested in what a sword would look like when all the plots were filled. He thickened at us. The black dragon did not wait long and immediately began absorption. David had the maximum level, and some equipment was in vain and was subject to sale. Due to the fact that Atos absorbed the opponents, it also increased its characteristics. The guy really wanted the same skills to be in the abyss, and unexpectedly remembered that bosses of gluttony and anger have a similar gift. It would be very appropriate if these two could leave the abyss and appear in reality, bring tribute. David liked that in this world murder was called reasonable use of resources. Now he wished two things: to leave the bosses, to leave the abyss, and protect them from death. But now these plans were not in time. The next secret kingdom of the dragons expected his arrival. But when he got his destination, the system announced that Hizzle tamped this dragon. The talented girl managed to successfully execute her father's assignment and restrain the word. Her subordinates could not find a place from joy. They expected a generous reward. Consul Douglas was also a pleasant impression. The man promised the girl to accompany their delegation to the City of Dragons and return home. But Heisel was bored because she could not talk to David. He was very capable. But she knew that he joined the association, so in the future they would intersect. Daisy saw a dragon with their new owner climbed into the sky. It wounded the girl directly into the heart and stronger than the previous news. All chats just got mad with the news about Hazel. She succeeded what Elliot did. Own Innocent covered Daisy like a tsunami. David also saw notifications about a new competitor. He decided to prepare more carefully. The news of the creation of a punitive coalition to combat demons also suffered. This detachment will act in the near future, so David decided to kill another boss himself. The boss of gluttony once again ate and felt a great sadness. He lacked battles. Although remembering the last clash with this crazy person, he did not want to. Suddenly, Gluttony heard the call of his ruler. He was not against the death of the ruler. If that happens, he better than humans. After a moment, the boss of demons put in the throne hall, subjugating the order. The ruler announced that he was calling him to death again and asked or did not mind. The Gluttony, of course, could not say a single word. He believed that there was no right to contradict. After a few seconds, everything was over. From this boss, David received many artifacts. The guy analyzed everything that managed to get and turned out that the objects were not inferior to others. Rejoicing in his luck, the guy decided to see a list of valuable things. Stunned, he even froze from surprise. He received an artifact confronting the sin of gluttony, a unique weapon. This glove was worth it to be called the weapon of resistance to sins, and it had even additional advantages. But this item could only be used at the level of semigod. After the meeting at the Holy Temple, Marilyn rejoiced, which prevented a New World conflict. She did everything possible to prevent repeated unpredictable incident. All entrances to the abyss were guarded. The girl decided to turn to the deity. In response, Marilyn received a notification of the impression of the red moon. The level was 14%. The Gluttony, of course, could not say a single word. He believed that there was no right to add. If up to 50% no one reaches the ascension of the gods, despair will be dominated among the heroes. The girl very much wanted this situation to change this situation. The world needed a real hero. The system cut off her dreams with another notification of receiving weapons confrontation of sins. The priestess immediately contacted all the guards of the abyss and asked to announce any anomalies. Receiving the answer that all is well, she realized that the problem could be inside the abyss. The girl remembered the same silhouette of a guy who saw recently in dark energy. The chat again fell off messages from alarmed heroes who received system notifications. Marilyn urged everyone to store a healthy atmosphere in the team. She canceled the initial decision and put the main combined detachment for the attack of the abyss. David suspected that another notification was reached on the mountain. The guy pretended to plan the abyss and realized that the detachment would be able to be teleported to the 500th level. But all this information corresponded to the usual settings, although it was a major violation. David decided to move Pride to the Gluttony area at the 100th level. After the last order of the Supreme Priestess and the change of the plan, Elliot went to fulfill the mission. He reached one of the aisles to the Abyss of Demons. He had already walked this road, but worried about his companions, but it was in vain. They were determined. They wanted to seize the third weapon of confrontation with sins. Kendall asked the heroes who wanted to lead the offensive against the boss at the 300th level. This proposal immediately agreed the Knight of the Temple of the Burning Sun of the Eighth Transformation. When the issue was resolved, Floyd ordered everyone to go forward. They quickly moved the Abyss dungeons and almost reached the 100th level. The Proud, who was instructed to meet the guests, felt the approach of enemies. Soon the heroes also saw ahead of the boss silhouette, and it turned out to be a complete surprise for them. The demon greeted them in all its beauty. She ordered people to prepare for death. The knight, of course, was surprised that the boss had changed his appearance, but not thinking in a fight. The death of the boy was instant. He even did not have time to understand. The Pride was satisfied. Kendall was amazed by the power of this boss. No one could understand on which demon is equal. The main magician of the detachment activated the skill that had to help them find out the information about the enemy. But what they saw further complicated their lives. Pride had a divine level. David was also surprised he never analyzed its characteristics. It turned out that the demonic did not get any harm from any attacks weaker than her opponents. The guy did not know how to respond to it. Now this talent can be called invincible. David Cotty was that Pride to put her label on Elliot or Floyd. Then they will belong to him. As the owner, he ordered the demon to defend the 100th levels of the Abyss and show all his power. The girl gladly agreed to execute the order. A group of heroes under the command of Floyd decided to attack the boss at the same time and with maximum force. Elliot also did not stay away because they did not have any other choice. The aggregate attack turned into a complete flame pillar that quickly was toward the enemy. In the end, the righteous flame completely hid the boss of the 100th level, and when it went out, no one could understand whether they managed to cause any harm. But after a moment, as an answer, Kendall and the head of the Guild of the Knights fell to the ground from a strong blow. Pride, with an indestructible health scale, said that death was the fate of people. The heroes used all their existing forces for this powerful attack, but they did not even scratch the boss. There was little time for reflection because the demon was prepared for the attack. It was necessary to defend. Declaring that this blow was preparing a magnificent offset for the owner, Pride attacked. And now the heroes have been attacked by a force that was several times higher than theirs. As a result of such an attack from the whole group, only 3 remained alive. Floyd realized that everything was so because last time they hit the king of firstborn sin. But Elliot interrupted his brother because this information was still in vain in such circumstances. Because Pride has lowered her sword for the 2nd time. No matter how the heroes did not want to win in this battle, they died unable to resist. The other part of the team could not understand how such a strong boss appeared at a 100th level. Floyd and Kendall saw how the head of the Knights of the Knights approached them. He said with a sum that he understood the defeat when the demon swung the sword for the first time. Kendall, from these words in general, burned in a spirit. Probably they will not be able to get a supplement. Floyd agreed that in this case, they were not destined to undergo a 10th transformation. Elliot summed up that after the Supreme Priestess of Gordon, the first absolutely invincible opponent. The old magician was well aware that it could mean hard times for the whole world. David did not shy away from ease the conversation of the former attackers. They had somewhat misunderstood the situation. The ascent to the deity and the 10th transformation will take place, but only with his participation. Thanks to the Board of Pride, the guy got incredible power. He could conquer these people. It was strange that one person was delighted with what was happening. It was a miraculous priest named Jujin from Shiva. This country has still adhered to the traditional caste system, all resources in the hands of the nobility. The considerations of Jujin were simple. It was a chance for their country to escape. Currently, the main thing for the guy was the inheritance of the ancient Exiller. David seemed that he had previously heard this name in the description of a big sword from the dragon bone. Accordingly, the black dragon Atos was a descendant of an ancient Exiller. Yudzin knew it from his brother Gabriel, who read this story near the secret kingdom of Dragon Spirit. Accordingly, the inscription, "Those who have entered the kingdom will be a chance to inherit this eater." The guy knew that right now his nephew, Harry, should first enter the kingdom of the Dragon Spirit. Earlier, Shiva country would not be dared to compete with federations and guilds. But now everything is different. You need to end the opponents several times so that they really die. David did not know even what to say. It turns out that the boy was a real intrigue. The first thought of the guy was to honor the Jugan, a moment of silence. He was very pleased that he told him everything. The warrior mag decided to look at the Pride, but it stood motionless. It looked very strange. The demon felt perfectly that the Lord was looking at her. She believed that he was tormented by her. Suddenly, the girl heard a voice that ordered her to climb the throne hall. After a second, Gordon was in place and was interested in David if he was satisfied. The guy replied that she coped well, and so he had a reward for her. These words shone the faces of the demon boss. David has announced that she wanted to give her royal mercy, and she has not to give her up. He sent his finger to the girl and drowned in the bright white light of energy. This caused a great delight in Pride, which was absolutely in love with its ruler. Not wanting to listen to the praise in his side, David sent her to the 100th level. The guy could not wait for his weakness because he has easily conquered Pride. Suddenly, the owner of the demons saw that the portal was opening in front of him. There was a high priestess, Marilyn, his own person on the doorstep. Sitting in her temple, the girl saw that the expedition detachment with the best characters was destroyed. She realized that the situation with the abyss was completely out of control and could not stay away. Marilyn asked for a blessing from a divine statue for intervention. She begged for help in spreading the light of the deity in the abyss of demons. And the girl's efforts were not in vain. Her eye of insight was increased to the eye of truth. And now, Marilyn, gifted with the skills of the highest form, has come before David. The priestess immediately saw a horrifying power of darkness and realized that she was the owner of the abyss. David was not lost and asked Marilyn what she was doing here. He told her that he had destroyed the advanced detachment of punishments, and rather this is the reason for her appearance. Finally, the Lord of the Abyss asked what meeting the girl awaits. The priestess was prepared for the attack. She felt that the opponent's level was more than the divine. Probably he woke up from sleep. Marilyn realized that she would not win this battle, and therefore needed to review the strategy with the detachment. But David did not intend to let her go just like that. With one lightning movement, he captured the supreme priestess in his hand. He was wondering that it could be obtained for her murder, but also a bad experience. But realizing that she was death on her eyes, the girl slipped out of the enemy's claws. It was not so easy to grab. After a moment, the priestess passed through the portal to the temple. She was well aware that she managed to escape accidentally. Her life hung on the hair. Marilyn never felt such a horror. If it were not for the power of the temple that teleported it home, the consequences would be unacceptable. She was told that members of the punitive detachment were already heading to the holy city. David saw Marilyn listen to the report, headed to her room. He was able to penetrate the leak through the energy of the priestess, its strength into a sacred city. By this point, Marilyn never left this place. Rather than everything, she just couldn't. If she was with a detachment, Pride could impose her seal of her soul on her. All raising the official level was guided by such statues, which was the main one. David tried to conquer her, but his power faced very powerful resistance. Everything was in vain. The guy decided to try to control other people, priests who were in the temple. This plan was absolutely real. The girl began to feel that some essence was trying to conquer her mind. After a few minutes, the priestess fell into the darkness and turned into a demon flax. David was surprised. It turns out that his strength was able to change the race. The reaction of the statue was important. And this time she was absolutely accurate and spread to every corner of the earth. All the temples learned about the act of the owner of the abyss, the question of the further path of development of the world. The final message was a notification about the formation of the demon fraction. No one understood who could have the desire to voluntarily go to such a transformation. There was an assumption that this was done in order not to turn into moist-controlled creatures. It also caused anxiety to the opening of the passage to the kingdom of elves. The unprecedented events occurred one by one, so everyone was waiting for instructions from the holy city. Clyde noted that the weapons of confrontation of sins received completely different, unknown people. But Benjamin tried to believe that a detachment of punishments would not give a slack and fulfill the mission. David, in turn, did not expect such an information bomb from his actions. But with the advent of Pride at 100 level, the transition to the detachment of demons can be quite attractive. The mind is not taken away, as well as the divine level, without the fulfillment of the world mission. The guy already felt that at least 6 top heroes were now thinking about this issue. David manifested itself to activate the statue of a demon, avoid observations, and implement its plan. The killer of the boss will become a new ruler, and during this time, the guy will pick up a boss of a higher level. A warrior mag couldn't even imagine what a creature could be. While he was immersed in his reasoning, the priestesses of the temple saw a newly made demon in the hall. But Sukkot was not going to stay in a holy place for people, especially when she saw the boss. Hearing the cries, the supreme priestess came to the rescue. She did not think for a long time. When the smoke was scattered, the priest continued to look for enemies in the holy hall. But Marilyn said that everything was in vain because the demons went. All the time, the girl was too self-confident. The power of the owner of the abyss exceeded the expectation. David, meanwhile, has already begun to listen to the confession of love from the first converted demon. But most of all, the guy was struck by the fact that the abyss changed. He found himself in front of the city of demons. One by one, the first subordinates began to appear in the wasteland in front of the head gate. In order to stop the noise that had been made, David sent a priestess to the flap to put away there. The guy realized that one girl would be difficult to cope with a crowd of strong soldiers. David set himself the goal of finding a powerful, majestic priest of demons for his temple. The warrior mag decided to meet the new king of primordial sin and called for envy. The girl immediately appeared at his call. She wanted to surpass pride. David appointed her the first majestic priestess of demons and ordered him to serve him. Sometime later, the guy watched how the large construction of the temple began. The envy managed the subordinates as if it were born. She also had time to teach a newly made priestess. Despite her download, she was envious of the pride and take her place. Moreover, they will soon withstand the Red Month's invasion of the ruler. Although she was flattened to be closer to the Lord, she has never heard about it before. She even asked one of the demons to read a system message, but he refused. He heard that heroes who take a 5-star transformation could face the moon. It put envy in an even more dead end. She decided to ask the Red Moon for the owner. But for all calls for audience, the answer was silence. The girl was disturbed by the periodic hibernation of the ruler. She was worried about the fate of the offensive. Meanwhile, there was a next meeting in the Holy City. The Supreme Priestess immediately hurried to apologize for the frequent meeting. But Elliot interrupted her. He wanted to go to business immediately. Marilyn wanted to discuss changes in the Demon's faction and the opening of the portal to the Kingdom of Elves. She warned that the transition to the Demon faction would be considered betrayal, which led to a discussion. The head of the Knights noted that the defeat was injured, and the update looked like a blow to their weaknesses. To Candle, he said that the Alliance's path is the main reason because of which people are still holding on. The Supreme Priestess noticed that they could help the opening of the passage to the Kingdom of the Elves. Floyd also supported Marilyn's opinion because he believed that they did not overcome the pride on their own. This boss was the strongest of the primordial sins. To defeat it means to defeat everyone else. It was decided to establish a connection with the elves as soon as possible. But the Supreme Priestess was already caught in advance about the contact. A moment later, the Holy Hall was transported by the Cat Lorenz court magic transformation. Looking at the audience, he greeted boldly and asked to remember his name. This behavior angered some of the heroes present, but no one wanted to contact the Lorenz family. The Supreme Priestess wondered about the opinion of Her Majesty, the Queen of the Elves, about the latest changes. Finally paying attention to Marilyn, the cat could not restrain her lust. The girl was a beauty. But the unrestrained elf greatly angered Elliot, who was barely able to stop from the massacre. In the end, the cat said that he brought the Queen's decree. They will help people in the fight. Instead, they wished the Princess of Elves, Lily, exclusive access to the Kingdom of the Dragon's spirit and sacrifice. The donation was 60% of the centers of the Red Moon. Such appetites were struck by the audience. This time, no one was silent in the Holy Hall. Everyone expressed what was in mind. Even the Kingdom of Shiva was against it. They did not want to give the treasures of the secret Kingdom of Dragon. Marilyn realized that she had to stop disputes and urge the audience. She said that the first 2 points did not cause comments, but the third affects the interests of Guild. The cat asked which countries have the right to get to the Kingdom of the Dragon Spirit. He eventually agreed to give access to all but who conquered the Black Dragon. Elf demanded to deliver the hero to the country of the elves, and this was very angered by Floyd. The cat was not going to explain the reasons for its decisions, which further provoked a fight. But, as it turned out, not all members of the meeting supported the position of the chairman of the guild. He began to persuade him. No one saw anything terrible about the Floyd Guild's sacrifice for the alliance with elves. They began to shift responsibility on his shoulders for the future transition to the side of the demons. Only Kendall and Elliot remained on the side of Floyd, who considered such behavior of colleagues disgusting. The head of the guild came out so much that he was as close as possible to the Lord of the Kingdom of Flowers. He did not have time to say anything, and Floyd's fist had already rammed his face. The next was the representative of the Kingdom of Shiva. Who would not persuade Floyd? He believed that no one in the right to teach his guild how to live. He agreed to make concessions but refused to give the elves the conqueror of the Black Dragon. After saying his last word, Floyd said goodbye to those present and left the meeting. Representatives of the kingdoms who got on the nuts have already begun to sharpen fangs for a new enemy. David also watched the alliance, which was formed against him. This behavior angered the boy so much that he forgot about the presence of maids. The warrior mag wanted to strictly punish the daring scum and believed that Floyd had not hit them hard enough. The worker's concerned maid finally dared to ask the owner what was happening. But then he looked around and only said that it was worth continuing the massage because he had shoulders hurt. David realized that he had not restrained, and from now on it is necessary to be more cautious in order not to cause suspicion. He was worried about the behavior of the elves, whether they will blame him for the murder of the dragon. When asked by Lily, she answered that the elf was not the case to the death of Dwight Lawrence. They are even glad. The princess explained that the elves always murmur water behind each other's backs. Rather, at the yard, they are afraid of the black dragon in the ancient alien. The elves did not want a competition in the inheritance of a burglar in the secret kingdom of the dragon's spirit, but David was not going to make concessions about his plans. He told Lily that the elves demanded her return, but the girl was strongly opposed. The guy, of course, was not going to send her anywhere. He would not allow him to conscience. But this decision meant that he needed to hide a girl from unnecessary eyes because they were seen together. David's reflection interrupted a message from Floud. He insisted on the meeting, and the guy gladly accepted him at home. The chairman of the guild reported that this time David would not be able to enter the secret kingdom of the dragon spirit. To the guy's surprise, Floyd replied that it was the requirement of the elves, which requires it. The god of war noted that this is an unacceptable requirement, and of course he disagreed. The state necessarily compensates for the guy that he has lost, but David will stay at home. When the guy replied that he was trusting Floyd, he said goodbye and went in his business. It was soon the opening of the secret kingdom, and David prepared a surprise for his new enemies. The next day, Hazel was sad about the fact that the conqueror would not be in the secret kingdom. It would be very interesting for the girl to communicate with him. She considered it an incredible luck. In the Shiva country, they were also preparing for opening. Eugen gave the instruction to his nephew Russell. The guy had to use a secret tablet to oppress other dragons. Of course, the representatives of the elves arrived at the discovery. There were 6 of them. But they, in turn, were surprised that 3 people conquered dragons. Eric, Prince of Elves, believed that it was quite important, because conquerors would not survive until the end of the mission. The cat, which, of course, was also present, has already anticipated entertainment with human women and new achievements. He looked at his 2 opponents and could not stop his thoughts. Kendall and Hazel, in turn, were disappointed in the elves and decided to stay away from them. The Lord of the Kingdom of Flowers ordered his subordinate not to hero, but to protect life. The same in the instruction was received by the ward. Soon Russell arrived before the opening of the portal. He was amazed by the caution of the Kingdom of the Elves. As soon as the portal opened, the guy rushed there without hesitation. Everyone did the same. Eugen was delighted with the idea that the stone tablet would force rams from the country of elves to obey. Destroying them, the Shiva country will receive 8 giant dragons. But as usual, everything went out of plan. In the end, Eugen lost control in his nephew, although he did everything for his survival. The emergence of a crazy hero Manga became unexpected. Elliot attacked Eugen as the anger of heaven, everything around the flames. It was David's work which controlled the sorcerer. Now Elliot will be forced to fight for him. Atos, however, the guy ordered to obey his nature and in no way to refuse. Receiving the team from the owner of the abyss, the magician attacked everyone who could reach. Stunned by such an unexpected blow, the Lord of the Kingdom of Flowers called on everyone to stop the madman. Seeking support, he ran to Eugen, but faced with betrayal. He was also influenced by Char David and rushed to attack his former associate. Seeing that the 2 began to fight, David ordered Eugen to kill the enemy. Representatives of the 2 kingdoms tied a fierce fight. The guy knew that the effect of coercion lasted for 1 minute. He had time to disappear. While David was engaged in those 2, Elliot ended in control. The confused magician looked around. He did not understand what was happening, but things were bad. In the end, the control of the UJGIN was also interrupted and the fight stopped. The priest of the divine sign was not mistaken. He realized that someone was controlling them, like a sorcerer. The trinity of the heroes had nothing left except to return to the holy temple. Elliot said that the black dragon seemed to fly to the secret kingdom until all were busy. Elliot was convinced that it was not a Floyd because he gave the word, but it did someone more powerful than them. But David cannot think. Because this guy had only a 4th transformation, he is not able to control them. Ever since they began a hike against the abyss of strange things happened one by one. Because of this control, Elliot killed the elves and just knows their queen now. The magician suggested contacting the kingdom of the elves to understand the situation. Meanwhile, in the secret kingdom of the dragon spirit began to change. The characters could not believe that in this place there were essences that even such winged giants are afraid. But judging by the behavior of the dragons, they felt the remains of the aura of the ancient Exiller. Cat Lawrence was not going to stop to seek Hazel. He offered her help if scared. Even Prince Eric noted that he had gone crazy. Kita had a fang of an ancient dragon that could suppress fear of an ancient alien. But Russell not yet opened his trump card. The guy believed that the audience was happy. Suddenly, the Conqueror screamed at the boss of the dragons in front of the boss. But Hazel, this Rick seemed to be familiar. Raising her eyes up, the girl saw a black dragon over her own person. Standing on the back of Athos, David counted his competitors. Russell felt his dragon tense. Even the tablet was no longer working. He was agitated. The cat began to shout that it was a violation of the agreement between people and elves. He was supported by the Prince of the Elves, but there was nothing to do. The knights planned to knock down Athos's conqueror from the dragon and so solve this problem. 4 daring elves rushed to the attack from different sides. But David, one wave forced them to regret it, leaving no one in the living. Eric and Kat were amazed at that speed. The guy had absolutely a secret. Realizing that David was very dangerous, they decided to apply their trumps against him. But Eric did not even have time to open his mouth. He was grabbed by the skill of boss of voraciousness. Cat Lorenz, seeing what was happening, decided to flee. But his plan was not destined to realize. Losing his balance, the elf flew to the ground. When David stepped on his face, he still tried to say that the guy did not know who he contacted. The guy replied that the one who went against him is waiting for revenge, even if God himself will be.